I remember when life first threw me a curveball, long before Amanda and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. It was back in my early 20s during the chaos of juggling a full-time job and night classes. I'd always dreamed of becoming an architect, but money was tight, and I spent most of my free hours drawing blueprints for friends who couldn't pay me more than a coffee. That grind prepared me for everything, or so I thought. The first real test of character came when my younger brother was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder. Our family rallied together, hosting bake sales, applying for grants, and fighting with insurance companies to cover his treatments. Those nights in the hospital, watching his small frame hooked up to IVs, I vowed to make every moment count. Around that time, I met Amanda. She was bright, quick-witted, and magnetic. We bonded over a mutual love of literature and late-night diner conversations. Our first date stretched into the wee hours as we debated the meaning of happiness and whether it could exist in a world riddled with chaos. By our third date, I was sure she was the one. Amanda and I married young against everyone's advice. Wait until you're stable, they said. Stability, however, was a distant goal, one I knew we'd achieve together. We rented a modest apartment, pinched pennies, and saved for a future we painted in vibrant hues. The arrival of our first child was both thrilling and terrifying. We were unprepared, but we tackled parenthood with determination, relying on hand-me-downs and sheer willpower. Our second son followed a couple of years later, and life became a blur of diapers, midnight feedings, and endless laughter. It was around this time I started noticing Amanda's restlessness. While I buried myself in work and side projects to secure a better future, she seemed lost in the monotony of domestic life. I tried to bridge the gap, planning date nights, surprising her with little gifts, but the gulf only widened. Still, I convinced myself that love, like architecture, required a strong foundation and consistent upkeep. The cracks appeared subtly at first. A missed dinner here, an unexplained late night there. I chalked it up to the stress of raising two young boys and managing a household. But hindsight is cruel, and now those little moments stand out like bright neon signs warning of the storm ahead. As we stepped away from my youngest son's dormitory, Amanda, my wife, wrestled with her emotions, barely keeping her tears in check. We had just helped him settle in, and Amanda wasn't alone in her melancholy. Katie, our neighbor whose son was sharing the dorm room, sniffled quietly by her side. "It feels like they were just little kids yesterday," Katie murmured, retrieving a tissue from her purse. Amanda nodded, accepting a tissue to dab at her own eyes. "It's surreal," she said. "They're stepping into lives where they'll make choices without us hovering over them." While the two women talked, I found myself lost in my own thoughts, haunted by a decision I'd been grappling with for years. Doubts surged as we approached the parking lot. Was I truly ready to take this step? Was it even necessary, or was it too late? Amanda reached for my hand, but I pretended not to notice, fumbling in my pocket for my car keys, even though we weren't anywhere near the SUV. Katie gave me a questioning glance, but Amanda spoke up. "It's okay, Mark," she said softly. "I know what you're feeling." If only you did, I thought, my mind drifting to the moment everything began. It was just after Amanda and I had celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary, which happened to coincide with an election year. Back then, politicians seemed to spend all their time accusing each other of being even bigger crooks and liars. I remember cynically wondering whether when these fraudsters died, they were buried in regular graves or just screwed into the ground like the tools they were. That afternoon after lunch, I picked up the mail and was pleased to find a padded envelope among the usual pile of bills and junk mail. I'd been waiting on a delivery of SD cards I'd bought on eBay. Excited, I tore into the envelope, only to find a smaller, slightly bloated manila envelope inside. "Damn it," I muttered, opening the accompanying letter and bracing myself for bad news. The letter read, "Dear Amanda, I hope this finds you well. I've recently acknowledged my heavy drinking problem and am working through recovery with the help of my higher power and a sponsor. I've been sober for 90 days now. As part of the 12-step program, I'm trying to make amends to those I've hurt. I deeply regret our past actions, but I don't want to disrupt your life or cause you emotional distress. That's why I'm writing this letter. I'm asking for your forgiveness, and if you wish, promising never to contact you again. Enclosed is something I've held on to for too long. I don't have the strength to destroy it myself, but I also don't want to keep it. Do with it what you will. With warm regards, Josh." "What the hell, Josh?" I muttered aloud, turning over the smaller envelope in my hands. It was addressed to Amanda. Josh? The only Josh I could recall was a guy we used to know. a washed-up loser who lived in his parents' basement until he was evicted for failing to pay property taxes. Josh was 10 years older than Amanda and me, and we'd nicknamed him Slinky because of the way he always seemed to bounce back from failure, albeit clumsily. My unease grew as I opened the manila envelope. A stack of glossy 8x10 photographs spilled out. The first few showed Amanda, years younger, striking provocative poses in a snug blouse and shorts I recognized immediately. Turning over the framed family photo on my desk, I confirmed the date, 9 years ago. Flipping through the images, I felt my chest tighten. Amanda's outfits became more revealing until eventually she was without top. The final photos showed her fully without clothes and in intimate situations with Josh. I sank into my chair, my head spinning. How long had this been going on? The photos left no room for doubt. There had been an affair. I looked at the framed pictures of my family, trying to spot any trace of Josh in the history of smiles and milestones. One horrifying thought struck me. What if the boys aren't mine? Grabbing a recent photo of Amanda and our 2 sons, I examined it closely. Both boys favored Amanda's features, but shared my jawline and build. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Desperate for answers, I rifled through my desk drawer until I found a copy of the medical forms our sons had filled out for baseball. Back in my day, forms for kids' activities were straightforward. Just a name and an emergency contact. Now, the paperwork had ballooned into nearly 6 pages, asking for details about food allergies, insurance, medications, liability waivers, and consent. Even the treaty that ended World War II managed to fit on a single sheet of paper. It was hard to believe that a youth baseball league could be more complicated than global peace negotiations. Still, I sifted through the bloated form to find what I needed, the blood types our doctor had recorded. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my Red Cross blood donor card. It confirmed I was blood type O, the same as Amanda. We often joked about being the perfect match. Even in an emergency, we could donate blood to each other. When I saw that my eldest son's form also listed him as type O, a wave of relief swept over me. Then I turned to my younger son's form. His blood type was printed clearly in bold letters, a positive. You don't have to be a doctor or even a high school freshman in biology to know that 2 parents with type O blood can't produce a child with type A blood. My heart sank. I stared at those 2 words, a positive, willing them to transform into something else. They didn't. Wild thoughts flooded my mind. I'll leave Amanda. No, I'll confront her. Maybe I'll take the boys and walk away without a word. Or perhaps My spiraling imagination only left me more confused. The boys were 9 and 11. Would they choose to stay with me if we divorced? Would they even get a choice? For an hour, I played out every possible scenario, each one more exhausting than the last. By the time I finally dragged myself upstairs to bed, I wasn't any closer to a solution, just utterly drained. The next morning, I sat silently at the kitchen table, watching Amanda at the sink. The previous night, I had avoided dinner entirely, claiming I wasn't hungry when she and the boys returned from the movies. Everything in the house looked the same, but my perspective had completely shifted. Amanda, standing there as she always did, now seemed like a stranger. It felt as if a magician had revealed the secret behind a trick I'd been amazed by for years. Every movement she made seemed calculated, every word suspect. "Amanda," I said finally, breaking the silence. "Do you remember Josh?" I couldn't see her face, but her body stiffened ever so slightly before she replied. "Josh, our old neighbor? Wow, I haven't thought about him in years." "Yeah, Josh," I said slowly. "You know, he was always running around with his camera, snapping pictures of everyone's kids. Kind of creepy, don't you think?" Amanda let out a small laugh, her tone tinged with relief. "Believe me, Mark, Josh wasn't into kids," she said firmly, meeting my eyes. I frowned, my tone sharpening as I pressed her. "Oh? And how do you know that?" Amanda turned back to the counter, drying her hands on a dish towel. Without missing a beat, she called out for the boys to come to breakfast. Then, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather, she explained, "I used to see him in the mornings, hungover and sneaking women out of his basement before his parents woke up." My voice cut through the air, tinged with accusation. "You seem to know an awful lot about Josh, don't you? Do you miss him?" "Not at all," Amanda replied, now facing me. "It's just that when Katie moved in, life improved a lot. You know how close our kids are. When Josh lost the house after his parents died, Katie bought it. She used her late husband's life insurance payout. He was a police officer who died in the line of duty. Since her kids were the same age as ours, they practically grew up together. It was easier for everyone to treat them like part of the family. Amanda often joked with Katie about claiming her kids as dependents on our taxes, and Katie, a single mom, leaned on us a lot for help. Amanda would send me over to fix things around her house. Katie wasn't handy, but she was easygoing, and our arrangement worked. Still, my father had raised me to be a man of integrity, and I never crossed any boundaries. Amanda tapped my shoulder playfully. "Mark, don't tell me you're suddenly jealous of Josh after all these years." I leaned back in my chair. "Amanda, is there a reason I should be jealous?" Amanda hesitated, stirring her coffee without meeting my gaze. "Of course not," she said. "Josh was just a harmless drunk with a camera. He probably could have been a good photographer if he hadn't been wasted all the time." Her words didn't reassure me. "Amanda," I said evenly, "you're acting strangely defensive. Is there something you want to tell me?" She slammed her coffee cup down and glared at me. Before she could respond, the boys barreled into the kitchen, cutting the conversation short. As I climbed the stairs, I realized that no matter how much time passed, the trust I'd lost in Amanda would never return. The next day, I brought everything to my brother Eric, the letter, the photos, and all the paperwork. Eric was technically my half-brother, though we'd grown up together. His parents had fled Eastern Europe during the Cold War and died in a tragic accident when we were kids. A social worker asked my parents to take him in temporarily, but somehow that temporary arrangement became permanent. Eric examined the materials carefully. "Mark," he said finally, "are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this?" I hesitated, but nodded. Looking back, I realize now how much of a financial strain it must have been on our working-class family. When I asked my mom years later how she managed it all, she simply shrugged and said, "Cut the bread thinner, add more water to the soup." My father, a deeply religious man, never turned away anyone in need. But his faith wasn't rooted in rituals or affiliations with organized religion. To him, belief was about action, not words. At the end of every dinner prayer, he'd say, "Next time, may there be more at the table, not less. And Lord, please save us from your followers." Dad treated Eric no differently than he treated me or my brothers. It was both a blessing and a curse, depending on his mood. Before he passed away, I asked him why he'd taken in another child when we were already struggling. His response was simple: "Because that's what a man does." Eric's pale complexion reflected his Eastern European roots, while my darker skin came from our Southern Italian heritage. Introducing ourselves as brothers often left people scratching their heads. I remember one father-son event where someone remarked that my mother must have been very fair-skinned. My father deadpanned, "Oh, absolutely. Her skin's practically see-through." Eric went on to excel in life. He graduated at the top of his law school class and was snapped up by a prestigious law firm. Over time, he climbed the ranks to become a partner, working grueling 80-hour weeks to secure his success. He had it all: a sleek car, a luxury apartment overlooking the city, and a stunning fiancée from a wealthy family who accompanied him to every major event. But his picture-perfect life came crashing down the day he burst into his mentor's office to celebrate landing a major client, only to find his fiancée there, in a compromising position. Calmly biding his time, Eric stayed with the firm through the year to collect his bonuses and benefits. Then, with strategic precision, he left, taking top lawyers and key clients with him. The firm struggled on for a few years, but eventually collapsed. Eric started his own small practice, focusing on contracts, wills, and other routine legal work. His real income, however, came from serving as outside counsel on high-stakes cases, essentially a legal hitman. Now married with 2 kids, Eric has a quieter life, but we've stayed close over the years. That day, Eric was reviewing the stack of documents I'd brought him. He leaned back and said, "Mark, you're still in shock. Give yourself some time to think clearly." "Oh, like you did?" I shot back sarcastically. "You're my hero for how you handled everything at your first law firm." Eric smirked. "Not everyone gets to be the hero, Mark. Someone has to sit by the roadside and cheer as we pass." Then his tone shifted. "Seriously, though, Amanda is human. Most people only focus on how they're being treated. They rarely stop to think about how their actions affect others." I rolled my eyes. "Great, now you're Yoda. Listen, I just want out. My revenge will be making sure that cheating witch doesn't get a single penny. Everyone will know exactly what she did. She doesn't get to blame it on hormones or whatever and think I'm some kind of idiot." Eric grew serious. "Revenge, Mark, is just another way of handing someone power over you. If they know they've hurt you, they win. The real victory is not letting them affect you at all. Trust me, ignoring the emotional misuser is the best long-term move. It's not satisfying in the moment, but it's the only way to truly move on. He turned to his computer and tapped a few keys. I don't handle family law, but I know someone who does. An absolute shark. No mercy. If you're ready, call him. Just be sure this is what you really want. A week later, Eric and I found ourselves in a high-end corner office downtown. Across from us, a heavyset lawyer, known for his aggressive reputation, was finishing his review of the stack of papers I'd brought along. Tax returns, pay stubs, mortgage statements, paternity test results, wills, and more. The list of required documents seemed endless. After setting his reading glasses down, he leaned back and spoke. "Walk away from it," he said flatly. I stared at him, stunned. This was the advice of the so-called legal shark? "Are you saying I should just pretend none of this ever happened?" I asked, incredulous. "Smile and carry on, knowing I've been betrayed." He tilted his chair back slightly and shrugged. "That's exactly what I'm saying. Unless, of course, you've got video evidence of your wife, Amanda, doing something insane like feeding your kids Red Bull and making them wrestle for prize money." He leaned forward and pointed a finger at me. "Here's the deal. You've got a decent life, a wife, a home, 2 kids. If you push too hard, you could end up in a tiny apartment broke, with your kids working part-time jobs to make ends meet while Amanda moves on with her life and her new male companions, all funded by you. You're saying alimony and child support will eat up most of my income, even for a child that's not mine?" I asked, my voice rising. "Amanda has a job, for God's sake. Why would I have to pay for someone else's kid?" The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Mark, I'll gladly take your money if you want to pursue this, but let's talk facts. Her income from that part-time hair salon gig doesn't come close to matching yours, so yes, alimony is practically guaranteed. The only question is how much and for how long. As for child support, there are only 6 states in the entire country where you could avoid paying for a child that isn't biologically yours, but was born during your marriage. We don't live in one of them. What if I can prove Amanda always knew the child wasn't mine?" I pressed. "Isn't that fraud?" The lawyer leaned on the desk, folding his hands. "Let me tell you a dirty little secret about the legal system. Even if you could prove she knew and deliberately misled you, this kind of fraud has no real consequences. No penalties, no repayment. Your wife could announce in a full-page ad in the New York Times that she's always known the truth, and the courts wouldn't require her to return a dime of what you've already paid." I slumped in my chair, shaking my head as he continued. "Don't believe me? A guy in Florida paid child support for years to a woman he wasn't even married to. When he finally got a DNA test proving the child wasn't his, the court still ruled he had to keep paying because it was deemed in the best interest of the child. That case is still dragging through appeals, but the kid will be 18 before it's resolved, and the man will never see a penny of his money again." Desperate, I asked, "What about going after the boyfriend? Can I make him pay me back?" The lawyer's expression darkened. "In most states, only the mother can seek financial contributions from the biological father. A handful of states let you sue, but you'd have to prove both the boyfriend and Amanda knowingly deceived you, and that it caused significant hardship to the family. And guess what? Our state doesn't allow it." I sank deeper into my chair, overwhelmed. He leaned back again and spread his arms wide. "You've got to ask yourself, Mark, what's more important, your pride or your sanity? Is it worth losing half your property, your savings, and your income just to make a point? If your goal is to hurt her, it won't restore your self-respect. You're better off cutting ties and finding someone who will appreciate you." Eric, who had been quietly listening, interjected. "What about marriage counseling? Couldn't that help?" The lawyer let out a bitter laugh. "Counseling? At best it works in maybe 10% of cases. Most of the time it just gives spouses time to plan their exit strategies. 2/3 of women who attend counseling sessions are the ones who ultimately file for divorce, and more than half of women who cheat end up leaving their marriages entirely." He fixed me with a serious look. "You're 35, right?" I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. "Well," he said, "the odds aren't in your favor. Statistically, wives are most likely to cheat around 45. If Amanda's already had one affair, the chances of her doing it again in a few years are almost certain. People romanticize their past mistakes, forgetting the pain but clinging to the excitement. That thrill becomes something they chase, and most will cheat again to try and relive it." Eric nodded grimly. Once a cheater, always a cheater, he muttered. The lawyer shrugged. Nothing's guaranteed, but infidelity is the second most common reason for divorce, right after money issues. I clenched my fists. I swear this won't happen to me again. The lawyer smiled faintly. Swear all you want, Mark. Swearing's just a compromise between fight and flight. I exhaled heavily. This is such crap. The lawyer leaned back in his chair. You've got kids, Mark. Divorce changes everything for them. Statistically, children of divorce are more likely to misuse substances, act out sexually, and struggle with anger or depression. No one wins in a divorce? Not really. But the biggest losers are always the kids. Suddenly, I recalled the day I told my father I was going to be a dad. His words had stayed with me ever since. Mark, he said, a lot of men become fathers, but few fathers truly become men. To be both a man and a father, your only priority must be your children. If there's not enough food, you go hungry. If there's no shelter, you brave the cold. If money's tight, you go without. Strength is key, not the kind of fake bravado that crumbles when tested, but real strength, the kind that lets you admit when you need help. You'll find out how strong you are when it's all you've got. You'll make mistakes, but don't let doubt paralyze you. A true man's efforts are rarely appreciated or acknowledged. Often they're mocked. But he doesn't do it for recognition. He does it for his family, for his children, because that's what a real man does. Those words echoed in my mind as I stood abruptly, pushing my chair back as though jolted awake. I extended my hand to the lawyer. Thank you for your time, I said. I've learned a hell of a lot today, but I don't think I'll need your services. What do I owe you for your effort? The lawyer grinned and shook my hand. No charge, Mark. This was just a conversation between old colleagues. Besides, he added, glancing at Eric, I owe your brother for bailing me out of a sticky situation back in the day. My door is always open to you, any time. Later, as Eric drove us home, I turned to him. Eric, after you caught your fiancé with your mentor, why didn't you leave the firm immediately? Why stick around for nearly a year? Eric's jaw tightened before he answered. Believe me, my first thought was to quit right then and there, he said with a wry smile. Actually, my first thought was to headbum that old fool. And I did. He fiddled with the radio, switching stations. After leaving him sprawled out on the carpet, I went to my office and typed up my resignation letter. So why didn't you hand it in? I was furious, Mark. Then I started feeling sorry for myself. But I could practically hear Dad's voice reminding me that self-pity is useless. Why should I let those two clowns rob me of everything I'd worked for? The next day, the senior partner came to me, acting all concerned about the misunderstanding. Eric smirked. What he really cared about was keeping me and the clients I brought in. He offered me the moon to stay, and I made him put it in writing. From that moment on, no one controlled my happiness but me. I even kept the fiancé around for a little while, just because. When I found someone better, she was history. Same with the firm. Once my contract was up, I was gone. Eric's words stuck with me. From that moment forward, I decided to focus on what made me happy, while staying true to my father's belief that children come first. As for Amanda, she became a background character in my life. Things shifted a week after my meeting with the lawyer. Over dinner, Amanda announced, Mark, I've got great news. The salon is promoting me to full-time manager. I'll need to work evenings and weekends, but I'm sure you and the boys can manage meals without me. It was perfect. By the time Amanda woke up in the morning, I was already gone for work. When I got home in the evening, she was at the salon. By the time she returned, I was fast asleep. On her days off, I told her I had a darts league. In reality, I started seeing a psychoanalyst. Through those sessions, I realized two things. I wasn't any more flawed than the next guy, and I was entitled to my own happiness. Amanda's actions, past, present, or future, were beyond my control. Life is full of temptations, and it's our own weakness that leads us to give in. The moment I stopped trusting Amanda, my feelings for her changed. Over time, the anger dulled, but the distance remained. Everything I did for my kids, period. Amanda became like a neighbor with benefits, someone who happened to live under the same roof. She was so consumed with work that I don't think she even noticed. Meanwhile, the boys and I thrived. I took out a home equity loan and transformed our house. A pool in the backyard, a new deck, and a fully loaded man cave in the basement. I ditched my boring sedan for a massive SUV. With all that space, I carted the boys and Katie's kids around in comfort, buying season tickets to sporting events and treating the whole group to pizza or ice cream after games. Katie often joined us on these outings. People sometimes assumed we were one big family. I'd half joke, I wouldn't mind that, earning a puzzled look from her. Amanda, meanwhile, was rarely around. She always had an excuse: her work schedule, exhaustion, or needing to relax. Eventually, the boys stopped inviting her altogether. A few years ago, my oldest son and Katie's eldest were both accepted into the same college. My son received a partial scholarship, but I quietly covered the rest of his expenses as well as Katie's child's tuition without her ever knowing. 3 years later, the same situation played out with our younger children. That brings us to today, as I grapple with the decision. Should I stay and keep things as they are, or is it time to move on? Amanda was lounging on the back deck, savoring the last warm days of summer, a glass of wine in hand. She gazed out at the pool as I returned from cleaning out the remnants of our road trip from the SUV. Settling into the chair across from her, I watched as she closed her eyes and sighed. "Mark, now that the boys are gone, the house feels so empty," she said, taking another sip of her wine. "I think I'm ready for a change." I had already made up my mind, though I kept my thoughts to myself. "Oh, Amanda," I thought, "you'll get the change you're ready for." I tossed a stack of papers onto the glass-top table between us. "Amanda, I think it's time we ended this," I said. "I want a divorce." Her eyes snapped open. She quickly grabbed the papers, scanning them. "What the hell is this, Mark?" "It's a copy of the divorce petition," I replied evenly. "Once you've got a lawyer, I'll have mine send over the official documents. As you'll see, I've been fair. The savings—" "Are you insane?" Amanda interrupted, her voice rising. "After 20 years, you're doing this now? After everything we've been through together?" She flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from shock to disbelief. "No alimony? What about the savings? The household debt? What's your game here?" I kept my tone calm. "We both make about the same amount of money and have comparable retirement accounts," I explained. That wasn't entirely untrue. I'd made a point of keeping my salary raises modest and minimized contributions to my 401k after using most of it to fund our son's college education. Amanda stared at me, stunned. "We only make the same because I work twice as many hours as you do. I'm not selling this house. I've put too much into it." "Amanda," I said firmly, "the house is underwater. And where do you think the money came from for this deck? For the remodeled kitchen?" She threw the papers back onto the table, her face flushed with anger. "We're not getting divorced," she snapped. "This conversation is over." Then her eyes narrowed and a new expression crossed her face. "You fool!" she hissed. "You found someone else, haven't you? I gave you the best years of my life and now you're leaving me for some younger woman?" Her voice rose, her face turning crimson. "How long has this been going on, Mark? How long have you been cheating on me?" I let out a tired sigh. "Amanda, let's not make this about that. It doesn't matter why. We're in a no-fault state. Everything, assets and debts, will be divided evenly." But Amanda wasn't letting it go. "No," she shot back. "It does matter. I deserve to know the truth. Who is she?" I shook my head. "Amanda, there were mistakes, yes. But we don't need to rehash them now. Let's just move forward." Her response was swift. She hurled her wine into my face, the glass shattering on the deck behind me as I stood and walked toward the kitchen. She followed, shouting insults as I rinsed my face in the sink. "You piece of trash," she screamed. "You think you can throw me out so you can chase some young thing? No wonder our bed life has been awful for years. You've been sneaking around while I stayed loyal." I turned, wiping my face, and calmly placed a stack of photographs on the kitchen table. Amanda froze mid-rant as her eyes fell on the images of her and Josh, each one more damning than the last. Her face turned ghostly pale. "Looks like you've had your own loyalty issues," I said, sitting down. Amanda stumbled to the sink, splashing water on her face before returning to the table. She pushed the photos away with one trembling finger, as if they were venomous. "Mark, please, get rid of them," she whispered. I slid the photos back into their envelope and tucked it into a drawer. "It doesn't matter anymore," I said. "I really don't care." "Mark," she pleaded, clutching my hand. "It was just one time. I swear. Please believe me." I pulled my hand away. "Amanda, I don't believe you. Why would I?" Tears filled her eyes as she continued. "It was so long ago. I didn't know how hard being a mother would be. I was sleep-deprived, overwhelmed, and you were always so busy with work and school. I felt like I was losing myself, like I wasn't Amanda anymore, just someone's wife or mom." I leaned back, unimpressed. "Amanda, I was working 2 jobs and going to college for our family. I don't need to hear about how hard it was for you." She ignored my words and pressed on. "Josh was just fun. His mom would come over to help with the baby sometimes, and I felt like I could breathe for a little while. Josh always had a drink in his hand, and I started joining him. Then he'd pull out his camera and take pictures, telling me how amazing I looked. It started as a game, pretending I was modeling for him. I'd lift my blouse a little or pull it off one shoulder. It wasn't a big deal. People see more on the beach. Her voice trailed off, but I had heard enough. Amanda's eyes glistened with tears as she began to speak. One day, I mentioned wanting a nice photo of you for Christmas. Josh offered to take it for free. The shoot went great, and the picture turned out beautiful. Afterward, our son fell asleep on the couch in Josh's studio. You mean his parents' basement, Amanda? I interjected, my tone sharp. She wiped a tear away, her voice trembling. Yes, his basement. Our son was sound asleep, and I didn't want to disturb him. Josh and I had a drink to wind down. One drink turned into an entire bottle, and, well, with your hectic schedule, you and I hadn't been intimate in a long time. I was feeling excited. When Josh started taking pictures of me again, I guess my bad side came out. He made me feel hot, alive, in a way I hadn't felt in so long. It was like we were doing a real photo shoot, and I let myself get carried away. I felt as though the air had been knocked out of me. I had thought the photographs were the worst of it, but this confession was something else entirely. Are you telling me, I stammered, that you slept with that drunk while my son was just a few feet away? Amanda's face crumpled as she buried her head in her hands and sobbed. Oh God, Mark, I'm so ashamed. I don't know what came over me. Amanda, I interrupted, my voice firm but steady. We can't change the past. What we can do is own up to our actions. Please, just sign the papers. We'll tell everyone we've grown apart, that's it. Nobody outside this family needs to know anything more. She raised her tear-streaked face, desperation in her eyes. It doesn't have to be like this, Mark. It was so long ago. A momentary lapse, a stupid mistake with no lasting impact. I pulled another set of documents from my folder and placed them in front of her. Amanda, I said quietly, every action has consequences, some more serious than others. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning charts and figures. What is this? She asked, her voice barely audible. It's the results of our family's DNA tests, I said evenly. As you can see, something doesn't add up. Amanda clutched her chest, her breath hitching. She began to choke, and I quickly grabbed a paper bag from the kitchen. Breathe into this, I instructed, handing it to her. Slow, steady breaths through your nose. After a moment, her breathing stabilized, and she placed the bag on the table, her face pale but composed. You knew, I said, my tone accusatory yet calm. It wasn't a question. She shook her head vehemently, twisting the paper bag in her hands. I suspected, but I didn't know. I hoped. I prayed. She trailed off, unable to finish. Come on, Amanda, I pressed. You graduated with honors in biology. You must have thought I was an idiot for believing your story about a premature birth. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I continued. You cheated on me, Amanda. And worse, you made me raise a child that wasn't mine, all while feeding me lies. Tears streamed down her face as she protested. It wasn't like that, Mark. After what happened with Josh, I was consumed by guilt. I couldn't bear to let anyone touch me, not even you. I promised myself I'd be the best mother and wife to make up for it. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. I had nightmares about you leaving me, taking our son, or forcing me to get in termination. Amanda, I said, exasperated, have I ever threatened you? Have I ever forced you to do anything? You know how much I value family. If you'd been honest, we could have figured things out together. Instead, you chose to lie. It was just one lie, she pleaded. No, Amanda, I said firmly. It was a lie every single day from then until now. You chose to live in deceit. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. You always had a choice, I countered. You just didn't trust me enough to make the right one. Now it's my turn to make a choice. She broke down again. Please, Mark, she begged. I shook my head. The lies end here. The boys deserve the truth. Secrets destroy trust, Amanda. Either you tell them or I will. Her voice cracked. What do you expect me to say? Hey, boys, your mom is a lying, unfaithful mess who betrayed your father? I managed a small, weary smile. You can leave out the colorful adjectives. Just tell them you made a mistake, that we both love them, and that nothing changes that. When the time came, the boys handled it better than I expected. In today's world, where blended families and step-parents are common, the situation didn't seem to faze them much. Amanda, however, grew increasingly bitter. She insisted we could work things out, lamenting the wasted effort we'd put into the house. But I was done. I wanted to move on. Oddly enough, the house ended up being more of a headache than the divorce itself. Our megabank gave us the runaround at every turn when we tried to hand it back to them. Every short sale we attempted was blocked, and we could never speak to the same person twice. Each bank representative gave us conflicting answers to the same questions, and the paperwork they demanded was beyond ridiculous. It felt like we personally deforested Washington State with the endless written requests we submitted. Thankfully, my brother Eric reached out to one of his friends, real estate attorney with a reputation for tackling big banks. Over the next several months, he uncovered numerous violations by Megabank, not just breaches of their own policies, but also violations of state and federal homeowner protection laws. Ironically, the tables turned when Megabank didn't even bother showing up to the court hearing, despite being served with 4 certified notices. We received a default judgment that granted us ownership of the house free and clear, plus reimbursement for court and attorney fees. What followed was a circus. Our lawyer arrived at the local Megabank branch flanked by 2 armed sheriffs, a court order, and a moving company. They were there to seize assets, furniture, computer equipment, and more. When the bank ignored repeated notices about the unpaid attorney fees, the local media got wind of the story. Crowds gathered to watch as bystanders gleefully helped dismantle the bank's signage and lights. The branch manager, visibly shaken, tried calling his superiors, but since his office phone was among the confiscated items, he had to use his personal cell. The story of David versus Goliath spread nationwide, turning our lawyer, and briefly me, into minor celebrities. As for the house, it played a role in finalizing our divorce settlement. Amanda refused to sell it immediately, so we reached a compromise. She would pay me half the rental value each month while covering utilities like gas, electricity, and water. We split taxes and insurance evenly, and we agreed to divide any future sale proceeds equally. Post-divorce, I did what most newly single middle-aged men do, rented a mediocre apartment while figuring out my next steps. Naturally, I joined a gym in an effort to get back in shape, though I've always hated working out. One evening, while waiting for a free personal training session at the gym, I heard a familiar voice. "Mark! Oh my gosh, it's so good to see you!" I turned around to see Katie, our old neighbor. She looked fantastic in a snug leotard bearing the gym's logo. She hugged me tightly, and I couldn't help but notice how firm she felt. "Katie, wow, you look amazing," I said when she let go. "What brings you here?" "I work here part-time," she said, glancing at the clipboard in her hands. "And guess what? Looks like I'm your trainer tonight. So which machine are we starting with?" How about a trade?" I joked. "I'll buy you the chocolate bar of your choice." Katie laughed and dragged me toward a lineup of contraptions that looked like they belonged in a medieval torture chamber. None of them resembled the gym equipment I remembered from high school. Determined not to look weak, I pushed myself through a grueling 90-minute session, during which I threw up twice. I lied, blaming it on too much coffee at work. Katie took pity on me and agreed to meet at a nearby cafe afterward. While she looked fresh and glowing, I felt like a zombie as she held my arm and led me to the counter. "Katie, when did ordering coffee become so complicated?" I asked as she rattled off what sounded like a chemistry formula to the barista. "Aren't there just 3 sizes, small, medium, and large?" She laughed, her voice light and cheerful. "Mark, just tell the barista what you like. They can make it for you." "Fine," I said, shaking my head. "Just give me something manly enough to drink at a football game without getting mocked." Katie chuckled and patted my shoulder as we found a table. "Mark, I've missed you." "Ha! You probably just miss having someone fix things at your house for free," I teased. She grinned mischievously. "Maybe a little. But seriously, I'm sorry about you and Amanda. It's hard to believe she cheated on you." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What? Who told you that?" Katie set her cup down and studied me for a moment. "No one. I've just known you both for a long time. I can't prove anything. It's just a gut feeling, I guess. She always had this look, like she was constantly hoping not to get caught." I considered her words. "So Amanda never actually said anything to you?" Katie shook her head. "No, Mark, but let me ask you this. If she came clean, would it change anything? Would you take her back?" I shook my head firmly. It's not just about the cheating. It's the lies, the betrayal, the lack of trust. Once that's gone, what's left? Trying to rebuild trust with Amanda feels as impossible as a blind man using a microscope. Without trust, there's no point. The marriage is over. Katie nodded in understanding. Well, she said, here's to moving forward. I tried to ease the tension by cracking a few jokes about my clash with Amanda and the unusual terms of our divorce settlement. Katie laughed, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely relaxed. The conversation flowed naturally, and before I knew it, the time had slipped away. Katie suddenly checked her watch and let out a small gasp. "Oh no, Mark, I've got to run. The last bus is about to leave." I waved her off. "Forget the bus. I'll give you a ride home." Her relief was instant, but she hesitated. "Thanks, Mark. My car's been out of commission, starter issues. I think it's finally given up the ghost. But things have been tight since my hours got cut at work. I was planning to scrape together enough to get it fixed after my next paycheck." I frowned, glancing at my own watch. "Katie, why didn't you say something sooner? Let's head to the auto parts store now and pick up a new starter. I'll take care of it tonight." She hesitated again, her cheeks coloring slightly. "That's really generous, but I don't have the money right now." "I couldn't ask you to—" "You didn't ask," I interrupted with a grin. "Call it a loan. Pay me back when things settle down. Besides, all my tools are still in Amanda's garage. I've been too lazy to move them. Let's put them to good use." I stood and extended my hand to her. "Come on, your chariot awaits." She raised an eyebrow. "Chariot? Please tell me it's not that oversized gas guzzler you used to drive?" I laughed. "Not anymore. I traded it in for a Prius, trying to save the planet 1 gallon at a time." Katie gave me an exaggerated look of disbelief. "You? Driving a Prius? I can't even picture it." "Trust me, neither can I admitted. "Every time I climb into that tiny thing, I feel like I'm losing a bit of my masculinity. But hey, size matters, right?" She laughed as I led her out to the car. We lucked out at the auto parts store. They had the right starter in stock, and it was on sale. Amanda wasn't home, so I still had access to the garage. With the tools I had on hand, I had Katie's car running again in just over an hour. Katie's face lit up when the engine purred to life. Without warning, she threw her arms around me and kissed me on the lips. I didn't respond, holding a wrench in one hand and wiping sweat from my brow with the other. Later, as I washed up in her kitchen, I noticed the faucet was barely working, and the drain was clogged. I turned to Katie. "Why didn't you mention this earlier? I could have fixed it ages ago." Her smile faltered. "You and Amanda had enough going on. I didn't want to bother you over something so minor. And, well, I've been trying to handle things on my own." She paused, her voice trembling. "I don't want to feel like a charity case." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Katie, this isn't charity. It's what neighbors do for each other. Besides, I've got more free time than I know what to do with. And you've got plenty to keep me busy. Let's make a list of everything that needs fixing and knock it out one by one." Katie managed a weak smile, brushing away a tear. "Okay, but don't blame me if I take advantage of your kindness." Over the next 2 weeks, I spent most of my evenings at Katie's house, tackling small projects, fixing squeaky doors, patching up paint, and replacing worn-out fixtures. Nothing major, but it gave me something to focus on. One night, as we sat together with a bottle of wine, Katie opened up about her late husband. "He was one of the good ones," she began softly, "always helping people, even when it wasn't his job. He died because of a drunk driver, hit him when he stopped to help a woman with a flat tire. The guy didn't even slow down." She paused, her voice catching. "My husband held on for 4 days in the hospital. The last thing he said wasn't about himself. He told me, 'Take care of the boys. Take care of them. And yourself.'" Tears streamed down her face as she finished speaking. I walked over and wrapped her in a hug, holding her as she cried. "When he passed, everything changed," she continued, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "Because he wasn't on duty, we didn't qualify for survivor benefits. His life insurance helped me buy this house, but it wasn't enough. His squad was incredible. They stepped up in ways I'll never forget. But it was too hard staying close to them. Everywhere I looked, I was reminded of him. I had to leave, even though I wasn't ready for how hard starting over would be." I stayed silent, letting her process her emotions. Sometimes words weren't needed. The next morning, I was lying under Katie's bathroom sink, wrestling with a clogged drain, when I felt someone tap my leg. "Mark, where'd you go last night?" Katie's voice came from somewhere above me. "Back to my depressing little apartment," I replied, unscrewing the drain trap. "You were wiped out, so I put you to bed before heading out." I slid my hand out from under the sink to show her the drain trap, now filled with tangled hair. "Katie, seriously, do you wash a mongoose in this sink?" Before she could respond, the front door slammed and hurried footsteps approached, followed by a voice I knew all too well. "Where is he? What are you doing with my husband?" I groaned, hitting my head on the sink as I pulled myself out from underneath it. Amanda was standing in the doorway, her face flushed with anger. "Leave him alone!" Amanda shouted at Katie, her voice shrill. I got to my feet, now awkwardly positioned between Katie, who looked bewildered, and Amanda, who was fuming. "Amanda," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "What are you doing here?" She turned to me, her face set in an expression of self-righteous fury. "Don't play dumb, Mark. I know what's going on. Every night, you leave this woman's house looking like you've just plowed a field. I know exactly what you're doing." She paused, taking a deep breath as though trying to compose herself. "I get it. You're trying to get back at me, but enough is enough. You've had your fun with her. It's time to come back home where you belong." I blinked, too stunned to respond. "Amanda, we're not getting back together. That ship sailed long ago. And for the record, Katie and I—" Before I could finish, Katie stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me, cutting me off. "That's right, Amanda. There's nothing between us." She paused dramatically. "But that's about to change. Starting now, I'm taking your ex-husband upstairs." Amanda and I both stood frozen, mouths agape, as Katie calmly took Amanda by the hand and led her to the front door. "Please," Katie said, her voice steady. "Even though we've known each other for years, call first next time. We'll be busy." With that, she closed the door in Amanda's stunned face. Katie returned to find me still standing in the bathroom, utterly speechless. "Katie," I managed, "thanks for the support, but you really didn't need to—" Before I could finish, she pulled off her blouse, revealing that she wasn't wearing a bra. Her confidence, combined with her figure, left me momentarily speechless. "Katie, are you sure about this?" I finally asked, forcing myself to look into her eyes rather than anywhere else. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around my neck. "Mark, I've known you longer than I knew my husband. I loved him deeply, and I kept my promise to care for our boys. Now, it's time to take care of myself." Taking my hand, she led me upstairs. The moment was nervous for both of us. Katie hadn't been with anyone in almost 2 decades, and I didn't want to ruin a friendship that had lasted most of our lives. But, like riding a bike, we found our rhythm. Later, as we lay in bed, Katie turned to me. "Mark, you're moving in with me." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a declaration. "Wait," I said, sitting up slightly. "Isn't that a little bold? What if this doesn't work out?" She propped herself up on one arm, giving me a playful but serious look. "Mark, we've been friends for decades. We're too old for games. You need a place to live, and I have the room. I care about you, and you care about me. It's practical. Save your rent money for your future mortgage. Besides, you know this house better than anyone." I hesitated. "What about Amanda? It might get awkward." I gestured toward my old house across the street. Katie shrugged. "That's her problem, not ours. What matters is what we want, and I want you here." And so, I moved in. At first, it was strange. Amanda remained bitter, unwilling to move forward. One day, while I was patching a crack in her driveway, she crossed her arms and glared at me. "Mark, when are you going to come back home? This is ridiculous. You belong here with me." I peeled off the cover of the sealant and replied evenly, "Amanda, I know you regret what happened, but it's over. You need to move on." "With who?" she snapped. "My clients are ex-wives, and I work with gay hairdressers. I never thought I'd become one of those lonely women." I didn't respond, gathering my tools instead. "Mark," she said softly, her tone pleading now. "Just give me another chance. For the boys, for the holidays." I sighed. "Amanda, I forgave you a long time ago, but trust? That's another story. The boys will be home soon, and we can alternate dinners between your house and Katie's, but that's it." Amanda folded her arms, her expression defiant. "I will never step foot in her house." "Then we'll miss you," I said simply. Surprisingly, the boys adapted to our new dynamic without issue. By Christmas, they had pressured Amanda into joining us at Katie's for a brief visit. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Over time, Amanda and Katie grew polite, if not friendly. Katie encouraged me to continue helping Amanda with small repairs and spending time with the boys at her house. After a year of living with Katie, I was happier than I'd been in years. Our love wasn't the fiery kind of our youth, but something deeper, steadier. One day, I brought up the idea of making things official. Katie cupped my face in her hands and smiled. "Mark, I want to spend the rest of my life with you, but I promised myself I'd only marry once. I hope you can understand." I didn't entirely understand, but I remembered my father's advice. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Life has a strange way of balancing the chaos. In the years that followed, I found my rhythm, not in grand gestures or fiery passion, but in the quiet certainty of a life rebuilt with care. Katie and I settled into something steady and unshakable, rooted in years of friendship and the trust we'd earned through shared hardships. It wasn't the kind of love that sets the world on fire. It was better. It was a love that lasts. Amanda, for her part, found her footing too. Over time, she let go of the past, focusing on her independence and her relationship with the boys. The bitterness faded, replaced by a polite distance that occasionally gave way to warmth during shared moments with our kids. The boys? They thrived, and watching them grow into the men they're becoming fills me with pride. Holidays became a delicate dance, sometimes at Katie's, sometimes at Amanda's, but they were filled with laughter and respect. Even if the past still lingered at the edges, my father's words often come back to me. A man's strength lies in letting go of what he cannot change and holding firm to what truly matters. Sitting on the porch with Katie, watching the sunset streak the sky in hues of orange and gold, I realized I had finally found my peace. It wasn't in what I had lost or what could have been. It was in the life I chose to build, one deliberate step at a time. After leaving Miami, my life took a strange, unexpected turn. I thought I had everything under control, surviving tough times and building a successful business through sheer will and hard work. My journey had been filled with pain and betrayal, but when I met Ellen, I believed I'd finally found something real, a bit of stability amidst the chaos. 6 years into our marriage, I started noticing small cracks, unspoken frustrations, long silences. I convinced myself it was normal, but the growing distance between us felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling something was off. One day, after calling to Ellen from the bathroom, I came out to find her in the kitchen with a stranger, his hands all over her, kissing her like I didn't exist. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. The man barely reacted, smirking while Ellen calmly asked me to get him a beer. Shocked, I played along. I grabbed a Sam Adams, opened it, and instead of handing it over, I poured it out onto the floor. I confronted him directly, making sure he knew he was no longer welcome in my home. As he screamed in pain, I dragged him out of the house by his hair, then returned for Ellen, throwing her and her purse outside too. I coldly told her to take her lover to the hospital. Before they left, I whispered in the man's ear, warning him not to call the cops, or I'd finish the job. I shoved him toward Ellen, her face in shock for once speechless. I walked back inside, and moments later, I heard the car start and drive away. My body shook, not just from what my wife had done, but from how I reacted. I'm not usually violent, but I used to have a quick temper and brutal outbursts. I had just turned 40, Ellen was 39, and we had been married nearly 6 years. During that time, I never told her about my past in Miami. I didn't mention growing up as a street kid in Little Cuba. When I was 12, my father was eliminated in a bar fight. A Cuban man got mad, thinking my dad was hitting on his girl, though she'd only asked for a cigarette. My father held his own until the Cuban's friend stabbed him from behind. After that, it was just me and my mom. My dad's end of life hit her hard. We were already struggling, and she started working at a strip club to make ends meet. She made decent money until a customer attacked her. The bouncer handled him, but the guy waited for her after work and knocked her to end of life in an alley. She died alone, and her body wasn't found until morning. I was 14. Social services found my uncle, Sean Hennessy, who I didn't even know existed. He owned a bar near where my dad was eliminated. He took me in, but we weren't close. I asked why my mom never mentioned him, and he just said, "Some things are better left dead." I was always getting into fights, mostly losing, until Sean finally took pity on me. He said, "JC, life's tough. Learn to survive with these." He held up his fists. "You can lose a knife or run out of bullets, but your fists are always there. I'll teach you to fight. The rest is up to you." He taught me well. The area soon became overrun with Cuban refugees, many from Castro's prisons, and I learned to survive with my fists and temper. I became known for my toughness in underground fight circles, participating in intense physical competitions that required both skill and endurance. By 19, I was a tough, hardened fighter and spent most of my teen years in juvie. A cop finally pulled me out of that life. At 22, I got busted again for fighting, and Deputy Will Hartman sat me down in a room, just staring at me for a long time before finally speaking. "Jason Michael Cooley, that's your full name?" I nodded. "My friends call me Jazz." He chuckled. "You don't have any friends, Jazz." I shrugged. "Jazz, I've got a proposition for you. Interested?" I stayed silent, just looking at him. "Look, I've got you on attack with a deadly weapon, your fists, and mayhem. You bit that guy's ear off. Lucky we found it." Yeah. "And don't even try the self-defense excuse. You're an adult now. No more juvie. From here on out, it's adult lockup." "So what's your point?" I asked. He studied me before speaking again. "Marines." I laughed. "Marines? No way." "Listen, JC, you're smart, tough, and you know how to survive. The Marines could use that, otherwise you know where you'll end up." "And where's that?" "Dead. Everyone ends up dead. So what? I know about your parents, your uncle. You've had a rough life, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Think about it while you're in lockup." I did think about it. After 3 attempts on my life in county jail, thanks to the Cubans, I changed my mind. The guy whose ear I bit off was one of them. Next thing I knew, I was crawling through mud under razor wire at Parris Island, South Carolina. Explosions and bullets whizzed past, and all I could think was, what have I done? By the time I joined the Marines, Vietnam was long over. I didn't see major combat, but I found plenty of fights. Stationed in Germany, some buddies and I went bar hopping in West Berlin, which ended in a big brawl. One of the locals, a 6'5", 300-pound guy, and his crew didn't like us. They made comments about Cuba and communism, and it didn't take long for fists to fly. By the time the MPs and German police showed up, the big guy and his buddies were out cold. Back on base, I was charged with fighting, causing a disturbance, and more. After a few days in the brig, my CO asked me, "Would you be willing to fight in a ring, Cooley?" "Hell yes, sir," I replied. I spent the next few years becoming somewhat of a legend in the service, winning most of my fights. But everything changed after an intense fight in the Philippines, where one of my opponents suffered a critical injury. It was a turning point that made me reconsider my involvement in fighting. Seeing him lying there, eyes open but lifeless, deeply affected me. After that, I never fought again despite my division's disappointment. 2 months later, I left the service. Back in the U.S., I enrolled in college studying computers and technology. I already had some skills from the Corps, but I wanted to learn more. After 5 years, I graduated with honors and a master's in computer science. Soon after, I was hired by a successful tech company in San Jose, California, which would later become Silicon Valley. I advanced quickly, but working for others wasn't enough. With 2 co-workers who shared my vision, we started our own company, CB's Tech Research Inc. The company grew rapidly, especially with the rise of the internet. Our breakthroughs in hardware made us a major player, and we became incredibly wealthy. In my early 30s, I visited Miami to find the deputy sheriff who had changed my life, but I was saddened to learn he had died in the line of duty. I met his widow, Angela, and their children. His daughter, Lisa, a nurse, was in her late 20s, and his 2 sons were still in school. To help them, I set up college trusts for the boys and provided financial support for their mother, all anonymously. Each Christmas, I received a card from them with photos and updates. That was 7 years ago. Now, at 40, I'd been married for 6 years and was on the verge of losing my wife. I poured myself a gin and tonic and headed to the backyard, sitting on a bench by the koi pond. The sound of water cascading over stones into the pond, surrounded by flowers and lily pads, was my escape, a place to relax and think. I reflected on what had gone wrong with Ellen. In all our years together, she never showed signs of unhappiness. Maybe she found me too quiet or reserved, but she never complained. I met Ellen at a tech expo in Anaheim, California. I was staying at the Marriott next to the convention center with Jack Bledsoe, my partner and co-founder of PackTech. While Jack was arguing about government regulations, I noticed a beautiful brunette at a booth filled with brochures. "Excuse me, Jack," I said, making my way over. I picked up a brochure on fiber optics, pretending to be interested, when I heard a woman's voice. "Can I interest you in the latest in fiber optic installation?" I looked up into her blue eyes and replied, "Only if we can discuss it over dinner." Ellen, as her name tag read, frowned. "No thanks. If you're not serious, please move along. She walked away, leaving a techie-looking kid to approach me. What can I help you with? He asked. I'm interested in your fiber optics. What's your company's installation capability for my firm? I lied, hoping to speak with Ellen. Which firm? CB's Tech Research in San Jose. The kid was stunned. You're Jason Cooley? Yes. Can I speak with Ellen? After a heated exchange behind the curtain, Ellen returned, clearly frustrated. Sorry for my earlier rudeness, Mr. Cooley, she said. Let me show you what we offer. Call me Jazz, I said, motioning to a table. We sat down, and while she talked about fiber optics, I was more focused on her. After a while, Jack appeared. Thanks for ditching me, Jazz, he said, turning to Ellen. I'm Jack Bledsoe. Sorry you had to meet my associate. Jack, completely oblivious, blurted out, We already have fiber optics. Ellen glared at me, realizing I'd been pretending. You're such an a-hole, she said, angry. Jack quickly excused himself, leaving me to face Ellen. I'm sorry, I said. I just wanted to meet you. Let me make it up to you. Dinner tonight? Ellen glared, then smiled. Fine. Where? How about the Cheesecake Factory at 7? See you then, she said, walking away. Later, Jack called my room. Dinner tonight, Jazz? I already have plans, I replied. Good luck with the woman from the expo, Jack laughed. You're gonna need it. Jack might have been right. At 6:30, I headed out, wearing my best. Levi's, a black t-shirt, a tan corduroy jacket, and white Reeboks. I waited at the Cheesecake Factory for 25 minutes before Ellen showed up, with 5 others, including the geeky kid from the expo. That's when I realized why she accepted my dinner invite so easily. Mr. Cooley. The kid, David Bailman, greeted me. Let me introduce my team. He introduced each one. Nice to meet you all, I said, glaring at Ellen. Call me Jazz. We had a table ready, and surprisingly, the evening went well. David had a great sense of humor and kept us laughing. After dinner, they thanked me and left. Ellen stayed behind. Thanks for being a great host, she said, smiling mischievously. I'm sorry, I knew you meant just me, but I told everyone it was an open invite. They were excited to meet you. Do you forgive me? I laughed. No, I don't think I'll ever forgive you. She looked surprised, then realized I was joking. We spent the rest of the night at downtown Disneyland, ending with drinks at the House of Blues. I called a cab to take her to her hotel. So, where are you staying? I asked. At a motel by the convention center, she said. But I was hoping to see the Anaheim Marriott. She kissed me softly and added, That's for being a good sport. I'd like to show you more in your room, if you're interested. There's no one else I'd rather be with, I said, helping her into the cab. A year later, we were married. Jack and John Stearns were my best men, and even David from the expo was a groomsman. I thought we were madly in love. 6 years later, I finished my 4th gin and tonic, looking up at the dark sky. It was time to go inside. The phone had rung a dozen times, and I didn't need to guess who was calling. I wondered if she'd have the guts to come home. I went to bed at 4 a.m, but lay awake for another hour before finally sleeping. The morning didn't help my mood. The empty side of the bed reminded me of yesterday's mess. I stayed in bed, dreading the day but knowing I had things to handle. First stop was the bank. I adjusted our accounts, leaving some in the checking for Ellen, but closed the savings and canceled her card. She had her own account and a good job as an executive at Waddell & Son Insurance, so she'd be fine without me. Her Lexus was in both our names, but I didn't care. I had my Jeep and Harley. The house was the bigger issue. With the economy tanking, selling it would be tough. I figured one of us would need to buy the other out. At the office, I called my attorney, Matt Braunt, and told him everything. He couldn't believe it. Jazz, there had to be a reason she did this. I don't have a clue, Matt. Everything seemed fine until yesterday. I need to find out who that guy is. Give me his license plate number and I'll check, Matt replied. I handed it over. Start the paperwork. I don't know if I can even talk to her right now. You need to talk to her, Jazz. Find out why. I don't know. She acted like I wouldn't do anything, like she was making me a fool. Matt looked at me seriously. Does Ellen know about your past? No, I said, staring out the window. I never told her about my childhood or the violence. I wanted to leave it behind, especially after liquidating that man. Matt nodded. Okay, I'll get started. Do you want her to have access to the house? A restraining order? She can access the house. I'll be gone for a while. No restraining order, not yet. Where are you going? Matt asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm not sure. Maybe the San Juan Islands or northern Idaho. I'll let you know, I replied. When do you want her served? He inquired. When everything's ready, I said firmly. Got it. And Jazz? Matt gave me a serious look. Take care of yourself. You look like hell. I laughed lightly, then left his office and headed to CB's Tech in San Jose. As I walked into the lobby, Jamie, our receptionist, called out to me. Jason, someone's waiting for you in the conference room, Jamie said with a smile. Who is it, Jamie? Why couldn't Jack or John see them? I asked. It's not a him. It's a her, Jamie replied, eyes twinkling. She asked for you personally, and she's very attractive. I rolled my eyes. Cut it out, Jamie. What's her name? Jamie glanced at her notes. Lisa Hartman from Miami. I froze, stunned. Lisa Hartman? Here? Thanks, Jamie. I'll handle it. I hesitated for a moment before entering the conference room, feeling oddly nervous. When I finally opened the door, there she was, Lisa, even more beautiful than I remembered. Mr. Cooley, she greeted me with a soft smile. Lisa. Wow, you've grown since I last saw you, I said, cringing at my awkward comment. She laughed, her voice light and cheerful. Yes, it's been 6 or 7 years. I was in my 20s, and now I'm in my 30s, fully grown. Sorry, Lisa, I'm just surprised to see you. How are Angela and your brothers? I asked, trying to recover. Actually, let's move to my office. It's more comfortable. She stood, and I led her to my office. As we passed my secretary, Lakota, she gave me a knowing look. It's beautiful in here, Lisa remarked, looking around the office. Thank Lakota, my secretary, I said. She handles the decor. Lakota? That's an unusual name. Native American? Lisa asked, curious. Yeah, I think she's half Sioux. Very protective, too. I noticed, Lisa grinned. She watched me like a hawk. That's her. Can I get you a drink? I offered. Iced tea, if you have it, she replied. Green tea, okay? I asked. Perfect. As we sat down, Lisa got straight to the point. Jazz, you're probably wondering why I'm here. I am. How's your mother? I asked, concerned. Her expression grew serious. Jazz, she's dying. She asked for you. My God, Lisa, why didn't you call me? I'd have come to Miami right away, I said, shocked. I know, but she insisted I come see you in person, Lisa explained. She wanted me out of the way. It's pancreatic cancer. The news hit me hard. I'm so sorry, Lisa. Can I help? Financial support? She's covered at the hospital, getting the best care. Your monthly checks have been a blessing. By the way, both boys graduated with honors. Bobby from MIT, Dean from Georgia Tech. Thanks to you. I silently chastised myself for not visiting them over the years. I'm really sorry I haven't come to see her, or you and the boys. Don't go there, Lisa said firmly. Mom said you'd feel guilty. You've had a lot on your plate. You started a business, got married. Your hands have been more than full. What you've done for us already is more than anyone could ask for. Her voice softened. Mom would love for you to visit. Can you? I'll have the company jet ready tomorrow, I said right away. Do you have a place to stay tonight? I haven't had time to find one, she admitted. Perfect. You can stay at my apartment nearby. Oh, won't your wife mind? I glanced away before answering. Ellen and I are separated. It's probably heading toward divorce. I'm sorry to hear that, Jazz. I hope I'm not adding to your stress. Not at all. It's nice to have you here. Are you hungry? I could eat. Great, I said. I know a little place that has the best pizza and Italian food this side of the Rockies. Lisa smiled. Can we stop by your apartment first? I need to drop my bags and freshen up. No problem. You ready? Lisa nodded and we left the office. I told Lakota I'd be unavailable for the week, but she could reach me on my cell. What about Ellen? Lakota asked. If she calls, tell her to speak with Brat. He knows what to do, I replied. Lakota gave me a sympathetic smile. I escorted Lisa to the parking garage where my Ford F-150 Super Crew was parked. We stopped at the lobby, where security had stored her suitcase. After tossing it in the truck bed, I opened the passenger door for her and watched as she slid into the seat. As I got in, Lisa looked around and said, I didn't expect you to drive a truck. I thought you'd be in something more fancy. I grinned and buckled up. Not really my thing, but if that's what you want, I can arrange it. Lisa blushed. Oh God, no, I was just thinking out loud. The truck's fine. Me too, I said, starting the engine. Let's go. The next day, after an evening of reminiscing and a restless night, Lisa and I were already flying over Phoenix, Arizona, heading to Miami on the company's Gulfstream G350. Lisa sat in the co-pilot seat, her eyes wide with wonder, mouth slightly open as she stared at the controls. Jazz, I didn't know you could fly. There's a lot you don't know about me, I replied with a smile. checking the altitude and speed. "So, what happened with you and Ellen?" "If you don't mind me asking." "Not anymore," I sighed. Somehow she thought I'd be okay with being her betrayed man, just sitting by while she slept with other men. "My God, Lisa, why would she think that?" Lisa gasped. "That's insane. Why would she even—" "That's the million-dollar question. I have no idea. I know we've grown apart lately. Honestly, I can't remember the last time we were physically engaged. I guess I was so focused on work I didn't even notice. And she never said a word." I paused, thinking back, searching for any sign, any warning. But nothing came to mind. To me, it felt like Ellen just suddenly decided I didn't matter anymore and she ended our marriage by cheating. But why? I glanced at Lisa as she looked out the window. "Tell me about you and the family." "There's not much to tell," she said, turning back to me. "After we lost Dad, Mom struggled to make ends meet. We got Dad's pension, but it wasn't much. I decided to go to nursing school, and the boys helped out with part-time jobs as long as it didn't interfere with their studies." She fell silent for a moment before continuing. "Jason, you were a godsend. I didn't even know about you, aside from what Mom told me. How Dad got you into the Marines. When you showed up at the house, Mom was overwhelmed. She knew everything about your past and what Dad did for you. He always kept her updated on your accomplishments in the Marines." Lisa hesitated before adding, "He was so proud of you, Jazz. Mom showed me all the clippings from your boxing matches and articles about CB's tech research. Dad was planning to fly out to see you, to ask if you'd come visit the family. He wanted to introduce you to Mom, me, and the boys." Her voice wavered as she said, "But he was shot and eliminated the following week." The memory of Deputy Will Hartman's end of life hit me hard. I stayed silent as the plane hummed, the turbines the only sound in the cabin. After a while, I asked, "I noticed you're not wearing a wedding ring. You're not married?" Lisa smiled wistfully. "No, I never really had the time. Between nursing school, working at the hospital, helping Mom and the boys, there wasn't room for anything else." She turned away, gazing out the window again. And there were other things. I wondered what those other things might be, but decided not to ask just yet. A few hours later, we were taxiing onto an empty ramp at Miami International. Soon, we had our luggage loaded into a waiting limo and headed to her family's home. Miami hadn't changed much, maybe a few more high-rises blocking the beach, but it was still the same hot and humid city I remembered. Lisa's mom lived on the southern edge of town, and we got to her house pretty quickly. It was a modest, single-story ranch with a white picket fence around the front yard. I was surprised at how clean and well-kept everything was. There were no signs of weather damage, which is tough in Florida, and the landscaping was immaculate. Even the roof looked like it was in perfect shape. As if reading my mind, Lisa said, "Your monthly contributions were more than enough to cover everything." I nodded. Lisa went inside while I handled the luggage and paid the limo driver. "Stay on call, Alonzo," I said. When he mentioned he had other clients, I reassured him he'd be well compensated. After that, I went inside. I expected the house to be dark and somber, but it was the opposite. It was tastefully decorated with a warm, welcoming vibe. Bright sunlight streamed through the windows, giving the place an airy feel. The air conditioning kept the temperature perfectly comfortable. "Jason Michael Cooley. Well, it's about time," came the familiar voice of Angela Hartman. "Hello, Angela," I said, walking over to her. She sat in a plush recliner with an Afghan blanket draped over her legs. "I'm sorry it's been so long since I visited." "Enough of that," she interrupted. "You're here now, and that's all that matters. Come here." I walked over and knelt beside her, taking her frail hand in mine. Angela smiled, though I could see the pain in her eyes. Even through her illness, she still radiated strength. "You've still got that amazing view," I said, glancing out the large picture window that faced the beach and mangroves. Angela beamed. "Yes, William loved it here. I worried I'd lose the house after he passed, but, well, for 4 reasons I didn't." She winked at me playfully. "By the way, I always meant to ask, did you pay off the mortgage 5 years ago?" I smiled. "Guilty as charged. I wanted to help, but I asked the bank not to mention it." Angela shook her head softly. "Jason, I know you feel like you had to do all of this, but you didn't. You didn't even know us back then, and Will was gone by that time. But I do appreciate it. You've always been part of this family." For the first time in a long while, I felt tears welling up. I hadn't even cried when my wife pulled that stunt on me. But here was this incredible woman, a widow and mother, telling me how much I meant to her, and she was dying. "Come here, Jason." Angela said, reaching out. I leaned in and she embraced me tightly. I couldn't hold back the emotions anymore. All I could think about was this wonderful woman dying, yet comforting me. I broke down in her arms as she gently ran her fingers through my hair. After about 15 minutes, Angela let me sit up and look at her. "Feel better?" she asked, with a gentle smile. I nodded. The weight of the past few days, Ellen, Angela, my past, had finally caught up to me. I hadn't realized how much I'd been holding inside. "Angela, I'll find the best doctors for you, the best hospitals, too." "No, Jason," Angela said softly. "I've made peace with God. There's nothing more to be done. The cancer has spread too far and it's caused too much damage. I'll be lucky to stay with my family another 3 weeks. Please don't worry. I'm just glad I got to see you before I go." Looking at her, I couldn't understand why good people had to suffer so much. It didn't seem fair. She still looked as beautiful as the first time I visited, and I realized how much Lisa resembled her. The same fair skin, emerald green eyes, and rich dark crimson hair. "Jason, are you staying for a few days?" Angela asked. I could see how tired she was, whether from the cancer or something else. "Angela, I'm not leaving," I said firmly. "You're stuck with me." Tears welled up in her eyes, and I could see how exhausted she was. "Now get some rest," I said gently. Angela smiled and nodded, leaning her head back to look out the window. In a few minutes, she was asleep. I stood, gazing down at her, the mother I always needed but never had. "Is she sleeping?" came a soft voice behind me. Turning, I saw Lisa standing in the doorway, watching her mother breathe steadily. "Yeah, she's resting," I replied. "Thank you, Jason Cooley." "Thank you for being here," she said, stepping forward quietly. She hugged me, and I wrapped my arms around her as she trembled and softly sobbed against my chest. My heart went out to this beautiful but grieving woman. "I'm glad you called me," I said. She blushed and quickly turned away. "Are you staying here?" she asked. "I think I am," I answered. "Then I'll show you to your room. Follow me," she said, leading me down the hallway. She stopped at the last room on the left. This was Bobby's room. He's living in New York now. Bobby got a job at the Dellenbaugh Research Foundation. He's working as an assistant to Dr. James Wishman on some quantum physics project. "Don't ask me to explain it. I'm just a humble surgical nurse," Lisa added with a smile, though I could see she was proud of Bobby's success. "Both Bobby and Dean have a lot of respect for you, Jazz. They were sorry they couldn't be here to greet you, but they'll be here in a few days. Bobby told me to make sure you feel at home." The room was impressively tidy, with walls decorated in paintings and sketches of stars and galaxies. A shelf along the far wall displayed models of rockets and spacecraft stages from different eras, starting with the German V-2 rocket. The lineup included the Redstone rocket with the Mercury capsule, the Titan rocket with the Gemini capsule, the massive Saturn rocket with the Apollo 3-man craft, and even the ill-fated Challenger space shuttle. At least now I had an idea of what Bobby was working on in New York. I glanced at Lisa as she stood beside me watching my reaction. "This is perfect, thank you, Lisa." Her expression suddenly became serious. "Jazz, how long are you planning to stay?" she asked with concern. I took her hand and whispered, "As long as it takes." Before I knew it, she wrapped her arms around me, crying again. I stood there, unsure of what to do, until she pulled back and looked up at me. Before I could react, she stood on her toes and kissed me on the lips, then quickly jumped back, shocked. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that," she exclaimed, spinning around and running out of the room, leaving me standing there, stunned. I shook my head, trying to collect my thoughts. "Don't even go there," I told myself. Lisa was an incredible woman, so much like her mother. She was beautiful, smart, charming, and had a wonderful scent. It would be so easy to fall for her. But she was Angela's daughter, and I was still married. For now, at least. I called Matthew Braunt and told him I had arrived in Miami and where I was staying. Matt sounded relieved. "Jazz, Ellen is losing it. She's been maltreating the office every day, and both Jack and John, those 2 partners of yours, have made it clear she's not allowed on company property. The last time she came looking for you, she caused such a scene that security had to physically remove her. Matthew, I'll deal with her when I get back after she's been served." "Okay. How long are you staying in Miami?" "A dear friend of mine is dying. I'll be here as long as needed." "Got it. Just keep in touch." "I will. Let Jack and John know what's going on." "Will do. Take care." After he hung up, I tossed the phone on the nightstand. The image of Ellen standing in the kitchen, smugly looking at me with her lover by her side, flashed in my mind. Screw her, I muttered. I unpacked, changed into something comfortable, and lay on the bed. It had been a long day, and I realized how exhausted I was. I checked my watch, 6 o'clock. I'll just rest for a bit, then help Lisa around the house, maybe get some dinner for everyone, I thought. Yeah, just a quick nap. A voice woke me. Jason, do you want something to eat? I mumbled, yeah, sure. Lisa giggled and said, what would you like for breakfast? My eyes shot open. Lisa stood in the doorway wearing pale green pajamas and a darker green robe. Breakfast? What time is it? I asked groggily. It's 8:30 in the morning, silly. Time to get up. I've got scrambled eggs, bacon, and sourdough toast ready if you're hungry. As I sat up, I realized I was only wearing white boxer shorts and a white t-shirt. Lisa noticed my glance and blushed a deep red. I went through your things and found a t-shirt for you, she stammered. I figured you could keep the shorts. You were so out of it and looked uncomfortable, so I helped you out of your clothes. Don't worry. I've done this a lot with patients. It's no big deal. Wow, I must have been really tired, I muttered. The last thing I remember was planning to help you with dinner. Lisa smiled and reminded me, breakfast is getting cold. She pointed to the closet. There's a robe in Bobby's closet. It should fit you. With that, she disappeared down the hall. When I walked into the kitchen, Lisa was busy preparing food and setting the table. How's Angela? I asked. Lisa sighed. She's sleeping. She's been doing that a lot lately. I nodded and was about to step into the kitchen when Lisa stopped me. Sit down, she ordered, grinning. I sat, pretending to be scolded. She laughed and soon placed a plate full of scrambled eggs, bacon, and 2 slices of toast in front of me. Where's yours? I asked. Don't worry, you won't eat alone. She sat beside me, devouring her food like she hadn't eaten in days. My God, you can eat, I exclaimed. She blushed, her mouth full of eggs, and mumbled an apology as she hurried to swallow. Sorry, I guess I was just really hungry, she explained. I glanced at Lisa's slim figure, wondering where she managed to put all that food. Just then, a voice shouted, Hey sis, where's the food? The kitchen door swung open, and a red-headed young man stood there, gawking at the table. Dean, keep your voice down. Mom's sleeping. And where were you last night? You knew I was home with Mr. Cooley, Lisa snapped. Geez, sorry, Liz. I had a very important engagement, if you know what I mean, he said, winking at me as he grabbed a plate from the counter. Once he loaded his plate, he dropped into the chair across from me, sticking out his hand. It's great to have you here, Mr. Cooley, he said. Just call me Jazz, I said, shaking his hand. Jazz, he mumbled through a mouthful of food. Then, glancing at Lisa, he asked, How's Mom? She's been better, but seeing Jazz really cheered her up, Lisa replied. So what or who was your important engagement? Lisa asked, her tone full of suspicion. Her name's Cindy, a real fine thing from the Pink Poodle. She invited me over to check out her sketches. She's got a great eye for lines and curves, Dean said with a grin, chewing his food. Ugh, Dean, you're such a pig, Lisa growled, rolling her eyes. Yeah, isn't it great? He laughed. Dean, I hear you graduated from Georgia Tech with honors and a doctorate. What are you up to now? I asked, trying to steer the conversation in a different direction. Shaking his head, Dean replied, Not much at the moment. I wanted to take some time off to be with Mom. After that, we'll see. If you're interested, I might have something for someone with your skills in California, I offered. California, he mused. I'll think about that, but maybe later. How long are you staying? For as long as it takes, I said. He looked at me and nodded, sadness flickering in his eyes. Thanks for that, Jazz. It means a lot to her. She's always thought of you as the son she didn't get to keep. So that makes you my bro, and unfortunately, Lisa's your sister, he teased, yelping as Lisa smacked him on the back of the head with a spatula. After breakfast, Lisa and Dean cleared the table while I wandered into the living room. Angela was still asleep in her recliner, the Afghan pulled up over her shoulders. I sat on the couch, watching her, overwhelmed with thoughts of Lisa and her brothers losing both their father and soon their mother. This isn't fair, I thought bitterly. Why couldn't I do more for this family, for this amazing woman? I didn't realize I was crying until I felt a gentle hand on my shoulder. Lisa's voice whispered, Come with me. She took my hand, guiding me outside onto the veranda. She led me further out, to a small hill sheltered by overhanging palm fronds. She pressed me against a sturdy tree trunk and kissed me, her lips firm on mine. Then she pulled back and softly wiped the tears from my eyes. I've wanted to do that ever since I saw you walk into that conference room, Lisa confessed. I'm sorry, Jazz, but your wife is a fool. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I didn't let her finish. I pulled her close and kissed her back. Lisa melted in my arms, her lips meeting mine with the same intensity I had been holding back. Everything about her, her lips, her hair, her eyes, seemed to capture my soul. I didn't want to let go, but eventually I pulled away, gazing into her eyes. Lisa, maybe this isn't the right time. We're both dealing with difficult situations. Your mother, my wife. I don't want to hurt you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, but I think I'm falling in love with you. Her eyes welled with tears. Jason, I fell for you 7 years ago when you first visited my mother. I never got you out of my mind. It broke my heart when I heard you were married, but I never forgot you. That's why I came to see you, to tell you about Mom. I had to see you again. I knew you were married. Please forgive me, she said, her voice trembling. My God, Lisa, there's nothing to forgive. I just wish I had known you before I met Ellen, I said. But I need to understand what happened with Ellen. I need to know what went wrong, what made her turn to someone else. I need to know why. I understand, she whispered. But just remember, whatever you decide, I'll be here. I always will. I nodded, and she kissed me again, this time just a soft kiss on the lips. I held her close, burying my face in her hair, inhaling the scent of lilacs. God, what was wrong with me? Here I was, holding an extraordinary woman, but I felt the need to remain loyal to Ellen until I figured out what went wrong in our marriage. Even though it might be over, I still loved her. But what Ellen had done, what she'd tried to do, had shattered my trust and love. I needed answers. We walked back into the house to find Angela awake and smiling at us. My lord, you two look like you belong together, she said softly. I'm sorry, Jason. I know you're married. I shouldn't have said that. Lisa and I both laughed, and I reassured Angela, it's okay. You and Lisa will always have a place in my heart. Over the next 2 weeks, Lisa and I were careful around each other. Dean picked up on the tension between us, often giving Lisa knowing smiles. One day, while standing in the hallway, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I'd be proud to have Jason as my brother-in-law, Dean said. So would I, Bobby chimed in, having arrived home a week earlier. Listen, guys, Lisa said firmly. He's married. I'm not going to be the other woman, understand? I couldn't hear their response, but I heard footsteps approaching, so I pretended I was just coming down the hallway. Hey, Jason, Dean called out. Feel your ears burning? We were just talking about you. Too bad you're already taken, bro. Lisa's drooling over... Dean! Lisa screamed, rounding the corner and swinging a spatula like a cop wielding a baton. Her brother bolted out the door and down the beach, with Lisa chasing after him. Bobby and I doubled over with laughter, and from the living room, I heard Angela chuckling. She'd clearly overheard the exchange. Our laughter stopped suddenly when Angela started coughing violently. I rushed into the room and found her hunched over in the recliner. Bobby, call emergency, I yelled, kneeling beside her and holding her in my arms. At the hospital, the doctor took us into a small conference room. Lisa, I'm afraid your mother won't last much longer. I'm sorry, but she likely won't make it through the night, Dr. Lou said gently. What would you like to do? Lisa, her voice steady but full of sorrow, replied, We want her home. I know she'd want to spend her last hours there. I understand, Dr. Lou said softly. I'll make the necessary arrangements. That afternoon, Angela was back home, resting in her recliner, her head turned toward the setting sun. She could no longer respond, but I knew she understood she wasn't alone. Lisa, Bobby, and Dean stood by her, with Lisa holding her hand. Suddenly, Angela pulled on Lisa's arm, motioning her closer. I couldn't hear the whispered words, but Lisa straightened up and looked at me. Jason, she's asking for you, Lisa said, her eyes filled with emotion. I knelt beside Angela. Though her eyes were barely open, they were strikingly clear. With great effort, she raised her hand and beckoned me closer. Leaning in, I heard her raspy voice whisper, Jason, you've always held a special place in our hearts. Take care of her. I know you love her and she loves you. I'll always be there for you. Always. Her hand slipped from mine and rested by her side. I looked into her eyes, seeing a single tear fall before she closed them. Gently touching her cheek, I whispered, And I will always love you, Angela. Always. As I stood, I felt Lisa wrap her arms around my shoulders. I turned into her embrace, resting my head on her shoulder as deep sobs shook my body. I should have been here more, taken better care of all of you, Of her, I shouldn't have stayed away for so long, I cried, and Lisa held me close. You were always here in spirit. If it weren't for you, life would have been so much harder for us. Don't ever doubt that, Lisa whispered, comforting me. Bobby and Dean moved closer to their mother, while Lisa continued to hold me. After some time, I regained control of my emotions. I turned to see Bobby gently pull the Afghan Angela loved over her face. Dean stood next to him, his arm around Bobby's shoulder. Lisa quietly left to call the coroner's office and the mortuary. Standing there, the former street kid, ex-Marine, ex-boxer, and now successful businessman, I realized I was helpless. Angela's children had everything under control. Silently, I promised Angela I would look after them, that they would be okay. I stumbled out onto the veranda, watching the sun set on the horizon. I felt Lisa's presence next to me, her hand resting on my arm as the last bit of sunlight disappeared. Then something caught my eye. Lisa gasped. Just as the sun vanished, a brilliant flash of green lit up the horizon. I had heard about the legendary green flash, but never believed in it. Mom was right, Lisa whispered in awe, holding on to me. I love you. I stayed in Miami for another week before calling Matthew Bront to let him know I'd be back the following day. Jazz, things are crazy here. Your wife is going nuts over your absence. She's convinced you're with a lover. Apparently, someone at the company told her you left in the corporate jet with a young woman, Matt explained. That's fine, I said, resigned. She can investigate all she wants. She won't find anything. Has she been served yet? Yes, Ellen was served at work. From what I hear, she broke down. They had to take her into a back office. I guess she wasn't expecting that from you. Have your PIs found anything? I asked. Yes, they have. Apparently, Ellen's been having an affair with a high-ranking executive. Let's see. James A. Reed, a VP at Dalton Communications. The Mercedes in your driveway belongs to his wife, Marilyn Reed. It seems Ellen and James have been seeing each other for months, maybe longer. She's been telling people you two have an open marriage. Does that sound right? Come on, Matt, what do you think? Yeah, I didn't think so, he replied, then added, Get this. She's countersuing for infidelity. What? I nearly shouted. Where did she get that idea? Well, she named 2 women in the countersuit, Angela Hartman and Karen Riley. Remember them? I warned you to tell Ellen about them, Matt said, his tone serious. Damn, I thought she knew. How did she find out? I muttered. That might explain why she's lost it, Matt mused. Time to set things straight. Okay, you were right, but that doesn't excuse what she's done. She should have come to me first. I could have explained it all. Look, you've got the paperwork showing everything about Angela and Karen, and Angela just passed away. I'm sorry, Jason. I know how much she meant to you. How are you holding up? Matt's tone softened. I'm doing better, but I want to keep the monthly checks going. Set up a trust for her kids, Lisa, Bobby, and Dean. I promised they'd be taken care of. They don't need it now, but their kids might someday, I explained. I understand, Jazz. I'll take care of it. What about the countersuit? I've got nothing to hide. Send her lawyer the full records on the supposed affairs. That should shut them up. Will do. By the way, was James Reed listed in the divorce? Matt asked, almost as an afterthought. No. Given the incident at my house, we thought it best to leave that alone. Yeah, maybe you're right. You did get some justice, didn't you? I recalled the scene vividly. You could say that, Matt chuckled. He's still recovering. Lisa saw me off at the airport the next day. Before I boarded, she hugged me tightly and whispered, No matter what you decide, Jason, I'll always be here for you. Don't forget that. I won't, I promised. And I want you to know, no matter what happens, you've already captured my heart and soul. But I have an obligation to Ellen. Somehow, she's come to believe I've been having an affair with your mother. Lisa gasped. Oh, no. Yes, and I need to set her straight. Not that I think it'll change anything. She's already shattered my heart and trust beyond repair, I said, my voice heavy with resignation. I understand, Lisa whispered softly. Please take care of yourself. I nodded and kissed her deeply before heading toward the boarding gate. I turned for one last look before she disappeared from sight. Ellen sat across from me, her attorney beside her, and Matthew next to me. Once her legal team received the notarized documents regarding Angela and Karen, her countersuit fell apart. Even the rumor of me leaving with an attractive woman collapsed when they learned I had simply flown to be with my unofficially adopted mother in her final days, accompanied by her daughter Lisa. The legal battle dragged on for nearly 2 months before we finally met face to face. At this final meeting, Ellen had insisted on talking to me before finalizing the divorce. "Jason, I'm so sorry," Ellen said, her voice shaking. "I truly believed you were having a long-time affair with those 2 women. Someone came to me with evidence that you were providing financial support to them. What was I supposed to think?" "You were supposed to love and trust me enough to ask me about it," I replied, my voice hard. "That's what you were supposed to do, not jump into another man's arms and flaunt it in front of me. Did you really think I'd just accept being turned into a betrayed man? And by the way, how's Reed? Or should I say, Johnsonless?" Ellen winced. "He's still undergoing surgeries. He was lucky they didn't have to amputate, but he did lose a testicle, and they removed several glass fragments from around his lap. He wanted to press charges against you for attack, but I convinced him everything would come out and his wife would find out. She's the one with all the money and power. She owns the company," Ellen said quietly, looking away. "I haven't seen him since that day," she added softly. "Let me guess. You thought having Reed over that day to flaunt him in my face would make me realize what I drove you to do?" I asked, shaking my head in disbelief. Ellen stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "I didn't expect your reaction," she admitted. I laughed bitterly. "Did I ruin your plans, Elle? Sorry about that. I know how important he was to you. Matthew and his PIs kept me informed. It wasn't much of a secret at your company. Everyone except Reed's wife knew what was going on." Matthew grunted and looked out the window as I continued. "Look, Elle, you chose to believe your so-called source instead of coming to me. And I know it was Reed. He was trying to dig up dirt on me to win you over. He just didn't look hard enough. And neither did you. You jumped right into his arms, didn't you?" Ellen's lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Cooley, you have no right to speak to my client in that—" "Screw you," I interrupted. "I have every right." Ellen gasped. "Jason, please stop." I slammed my hand on the table and leaned forward. "You never gave me a chance, Elle. You wanted this to happen. I think you needed it to happen. You fell for him and didn't want to risk that he might have been wrong about me." I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the courtyard. After a moment, I turned back, my voice softer but full of pain. "Tell me the truth, Elle. What did I do to push you away? It couldn't have been just what Reed said. Was I a bad husband? Did I not give you enough attention? Was I not enough in bed? What was it?" I demanded, my gaze piercing hers. Tears streamed down Ellen's face as she stammered. I don't know, Jason." "Don't call me that," I said coldly. "Only those I love and care about call me Jazz. You lost that right the moment you let another man touch you." Ellen's eyes widened, her mouth opened in shock. I... Her words faltered, and she abruptly stood and fled the room, tears streaming down her face. Her attorney glared at me and followed her out. Matthew sighed and began packing the documents. "Well, I guess that's the end of this meeting. I'll handle the paperwork and filing. Anything else, Jazz?" My chest still tight from the confrontation, I shook my head. "No, I'm going to the condo. Call me if you need anything." Matt nodded as I left the office, unsure where that emotional outburst had come from. I thought I had moved past all of it, but maybe Ellen's betrayal still hurt more than I realized. Back at my condo, I grabbed a beer and sat on the patio, watching planes take off and land at the nearby airport. My thoughts drifted between Ellen, Angela, and Lisa. While I still had some feelings for Ellen, she had destroyed most of the love I once had for her. Nothing could justify her actions. I pictured Lisa on the beach, watching the sunset. She was like a sister to me, Angela's daughter, and just a few years younger. But I wondered how her father, Deputy Hartman, would feel. Would he approve of me being with her? I doubted it. He had only known me as a troubled street kid. "Maybe I wasn't meant to be happy," I muttered. Angela's voice suddenly echoed in my mind. "Jason, don't you dare think like that. You promised me you'd be there for Lisa." Her image vanished as I reached for her. I jolted awake, still on the patio, realizing what I had to do. Meanwhile, Lisa sat under a mangrove tree by the ocean, waiting for Jason to reach out. She wondered if he had decided to fix things with Ellen, the thought making her heart ache. How could he go back to a woman who betrayed him so deeply? Tears welled up in her eyes when she heard a soft voice say, "Here, use this." Jason knelt beside her, gently wiping her tears away. She looked into his eyes, the only man she had ever loved. "I'm sorry it took so long," Jason said softly. "You're here. That's all that matters," Lisa whispered, her voice shaky. He kissed her gently. "And I'll always be with you," he promised. They turned to watch the sunset together as a brilliant flash of green lit the horizon, nature's way of blessing their love. Lisa looked up, imagining her parents smiling down on them.
On a sunny Sunday, I drove my wife's car to purchase a couple of new lawn chairs. To accomplish this, I decided to listen to the program called This American Life on the NPR channel and got absorbed in the captivating stories they were presenting. While driving, I heard about a book on the radio that grabbed my attention, and I had to jot down its title. With one hand on the steering wheel, I searched in the center console with the other hand, feeling around for the handle. Among various items that appeared from the depths beneath the CD cases, like a crumpled honey wrapper, a folded Starbucks drink package, a quarter, and even a folding comb, I found something quite unexpected: a package of contraceptives. This surprise startled me, causing me to momentarily loosen my grip on the steering wheel, nearly veering off the road. Moments like these stay etched in memory, replaying in slow motion. In each frame, a red Toyota passed me on the left, driven by a red-haired girl with an earring. Returning my focus to the road, I noticed the speedometer showed 34 miles per hour. Dust particles had settled on the dashboard, a reminder of the passage of time. Anticipating a green traffic light, I felt a sense of assurance. Beneath the windshield, crushed beetles offered evidence of previous journeys. However, when I retrieved the CD case, its rough edges unexpectedly scratched my wrist, catching me off guard. These unusual sensations disrupted my train of thought, making it difficult to think clearly. Amidst this confusion, a question emerged. Had I ever asked myself, is this mine? Had I ever contemplated infidelity? Thoughts, unlike images, tend to be messy and bewildering. Perhaps I worried about guilt stemming from inadvertently revealing a potentially dark secret. Or maybe fear overwhelmed me. It's possible I harbored doubts about having done something wrong. I meticulously combed through every corner of the car, starting with the glove compartment and ending in the trunk. I even checked all the doors and scrutinized the seats. Finally, my efforts paid off when I found a small package hidden beneath the passenger seat, cleverly concealed in a plastic bag from a supermarket. Gently unwrapping it, I discovered a compact, spiral-bound notebook. My heart raced as I opened it and began examining its contents. The first 2 pages were blank, piquing my curiosity. As I turned to subsequent pages, I encountered a series of cryptic lists. One of the entries was crossed out, capturing my attention. Under different circumstances, I might not have paid these lists any mind or pondered their significance. However, a familiar pattern started to emerge: the schedule of my work-related trips. The crossed-out date signaled the day I fell ill and had to unexpectedly stay home. Discovered earlier, the contraceptive hinted at a message directing my thoughts toward the hotels I frequented during my trips. Holiday Inn, Quality Inn. As I pieced together the clues, everything pointed to a planned meeting at the Travel Lodge or Holiday Inn the following day at precisely 1:30 p.m. This revelation left me with a mix of shock and disbelief. I desperately hoped that my assumptions were incorrect, that there was some other explanation. Yet the unmistakable presence of the contraceptive seemed to confirm the worst-case scenario. I had to confront a harsh reality. It turned out my wife had been having an ongoing affair for 4 months. This shattered any hope that it was an isolated incident. The evidence indicated she had indeed cheated on me, and with serious intentions. A lingering suspicion grew that she maintained a secretive and elusive list. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Deep down, I sensed I was on the brink of losing her, and conflicting emotions raged within me. On one hand, I couldn't deny the resentment and anger that had built up, deeming her undeserving of my attention. On the other hand, love still resided in my heart, and letting go was incredibly difficult. The daunting task of confronting her lay ahead, and the thought of facing this painful truth filled me with fear. Questions swirled in my mind. How could I move on? In that moment, I shook my head, closed my eyes, and realized I was utterly lost. Doubts consumed me. Was she involved in something illegal? Did she have a hidden business on the side? Why the need for such secrecy? What if her affections had shifted to another person, even another woman? Uncertainty and confusion overwhelmed me, ensnaring me in a tangle of emotions. Lacking sufficient information about the situation, I felt entirely unsure how to approach her and initiate a conversation. Thoughts of what she might say raced through my mind. Would she express remorse with words like, "I'm sorry, my love. I never wanted you to find out. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. I must leave you because I've made a grave mistake." Or would there be accusations and blackmail in her explanations, claiming she was compelled into an affair with an unknown person? Perhaps she'd shift the blame onto me, asserting that my absence and suspicions of infidelity had driven her to seek revenge. The potential scenarios seemed endless, and I couldn't predict what she might actually say. In the midst of this crisis, a startling discovery was revealed to me. She found out about my infertility and, in search of pregnancy, slept with my own brother. Just this thought sent goosebumps down my spine, emphasizing the depth of secrets and deception that were embedded in our relationship. Am I infertile? Why not reveal everything? I have supernatural powers as a vampire. I work undercover as a secret agent, and the nature of my mission is strictly classified. But, dear, I want you to understand that I am doing this only for the sake of my country. I carefully returned the contraceptive and the notebook to its place. When you are overcome by deep sadness, the lower part of your face seems to be attracted to the earth, as if gravity holds it more strongly. I was at a loss what to do or think. I had read enough about infidelity to understand that a woman can have an affair because of her own misfortune, and this suggested that perhaps I was to some extent to blame for this situation. My sense of self remained intact. It wasn't the end of my life. I experienced mixed emotions, resentment, anger, sadness, confusion, and in those dark hours, I wondered if I had made the wrong choice in life, if I was inherently flawed, if I needed to turn into someone else. That night, I put on the mask of a familiar person. When Sherry tried to start a conversation about a book she was reading, I pretended to be focused on work, saying that I had a difficult week ahead and I couldn't get rid of anxiety. "I'm sorry, my love, I feel a bit withdrawn." She retired to the bedroom to immerse herself in reading. Meanwhile, I was cleaning the dishes and doing household chores, even stayed here until she fell asleep. The next morning, I hurriedly got dressed, left the house, and drove without leaving the car. Made the morning call. By 10 in the morning, I drove up to the old Holiday Inn. Unlike modern establishments, this hotel allows guests to park their cars next to the rooms, bypassing the entrance to the hotel through the lobby. In moments of despair, you have to act outside the box. I must admit that I don't know how to cheat. Instinct compels me to tell the whole truth, and this tendency, as a rule, benefits me in my work, the whole truth. And this tendency, as a rule, benefits me. In my work, sharing information creates a sense of connection, allowing others to genuinely get attached to me. Or maybe they just pretend to be friendly in order to gain additional knowledge. Ideally, I hope that everything will happen according to the first scenario. However, I have long since given up the idea that business contacts can be considered real friends. "Hello?" I greeted the receptionist. "I think my wife has to meet someone here at 130. His reaction was subtle. I suspect that she may be having an affair, and I would like to find out the identity of her companion. A skeptical expression appeared on his face. "I just want to see the surveillance footage." His doubt was obvious. "I'm afraid I can't grant you access, sir. With all due respect to you, there are doubts about your intentions. This hotel is responsible for the safety and privacy of its guests, not for your personal investigations. There is a possibility that you may pose a threat to this woman. I apologize for assuming that she is your wife without getting confirmation." As my first boss said, when I enter uncharted territory, additional time should be allocated, since rarely everything happens as expected. If my life was a detective novel, I could slip a $20 bill to the desk clerk unnoticed to gain access. But I am not one of those who resort to such tactics. On the contrary, as an experienced negotiator and manager, I'm able to find mutually beneficial solutions. The receptionist and I struck up a conversation, and soon he realized that it would be beneficial for the hotel if I watched the security monitors in his presence, which would ensure transparency of my actions, realizing that if I leave, I will be able to monitor the territory outside the hotel, and he will be powerless to prevent any unpredictable actions. Such a scenario could lead to legal consequences for the hotel. so it became obvious that in order to reduce the risk, it was necessary to keep me on the hotel grounds. I find great satisfaction in reaching agreements that satisfy both sides. As a gesture of goodwill, I treated us to lunch at Subway, choosing for myself a classic sub with tuna and for him, chicken with bacon and ranch. After parking the car on the other side of the street, I went back to the hotel and we watched the local news together at noon. During our communication, I openly shared information with him, discussing details related to the notebook and contraceptives. During our conversation, he talked about his personal life, shared stories about his family, including his nephew's imprisonment and his father's health problems. While enjoying the sandwiches, we started a conversation about fat, calories, and various eating methods, during which he mentioned his attempt to follow the Atkins diet. We agreed that the most difficult aspect of any diet is maintaining the achieved weight. It was as if we quickly became friends, knowing that our paths would most likely never cross again. Exactly at 125, she arrived. After parking the car at the back entrance, the farthest from the street, she remained sitting inside, engrossed in a telephone conversation. I could clearly see her face through the monitor. After finishing the conversation, she looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror, absently twirling a strand of hair in her hands. Suddenly, at exactly 13.30, an elegant blue BMW stopped next to her. On the driver's side, a tall gentleman with a shock of brown hair got out of the car. He walked easily to the hotel entrance, handed over the room key, and looked back in the direction of my wife. In response, Sherry opened the car door, took one last look at her reflection, and confidently walked towards the man waiting for her. As she passed him, he gently wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her to him. The hotel door closed behind them, sealing their private moment. The idea of an affair is easy to understand. We all used to be fond of it. But with effort and time, you can recover from such an affair by acknowledging your pain and recognizing the underlying causes you can choose to return. The most destructive outcome would be a connection with my worst enemy, a betrayal so cruel that it would make me feel as insignificant as the dirt on someone's shoe. It becomes almost impossible to escape doubt about the honesty of your own views or the presence of a fatal flaw in decision-making, leaving you attracted to false personalities. Perhaps you were deceived by Delilah herself, sweetly communicating with you while plotting your demise. This situation neither aligns with the best nor the worst options. It resides in the murky middle, where complexity deepens. It encompasses two betrayals, one by your wife and another by someone else. If the other party is merely a golf buddy or someone of little significance, say the husband of one of your wife's friends, their betrayal carries limited weight. They are just another disrespectful person. However, if this person turns out to be your father or brother, a close family member, their betrayal might hurt even more than if it were your wife. After all, a wife isn't related by blood, and though you might feel so angry that you could end up physically fighting with your brother, you might ultimately prioritize your family ties over your marriage. She started an affair with your best friend Tom, betraying not only your friendship, but also your marriage. Tom had been your best man at your wedding, just as you had been for his younger brother at his own wedding. You'd known Tom for 20 years, since you were 7 years old. He understood how important Sherry was to you and how committed you were to your marriage and trust. This betrayal deeply hurt you and weakened your once strong relationship. However, the understanding between you and the receptionist was clear. You shook hands, confirming that your friendship wouldn't be overshadowed by minor misunderstandings and that drink and basketball wouldn't create a divide. You crossed the street and headed for the golf course, where you got into your car and started hitting golf balls. With each swing, your ordinary clubs felt like perfectly balanced extensions of your body, and the wooden pieces became sharp and precise. Hitting the 4-iron shot was particularly satisfying as the ball soared into the air. These fleeting moments of clarity are what make golf both challenging and exhilarating. Feeling a surge of confidence, you decided to call Tom at home, greeted his wife Peg, and invited them to join you for dinner. You set up a meeting at Cyros for 7. After making the call, you felt like a winner. Just like you had dominated with the 4-iron, you called home and left a message for Sherry, letting her know you'd be early and arranging to meet at Kairos at 7. You also left the same message on her mobile phone to make sure she got it. When you arrived home at 6, you noticed Sherry was already in the shower. Her gym bag was open on the floor, tempting you to explore its contents. You couldn't resist your curiosity, hoping to find something noteworthy. Unfortunately, you found nothing of interest. You called out to Sherry, expressing your intention to take a shower as well, realizing this might be your last chance with her before things got worse. Uncertainty hung over your future, and you were determined to convey your love for her. Sherry, breathing heavily as if she'd just finished a vigorous run, snuggled up to you. Her satisfaction was clear in her voice as she praised the experience, and you both agreed to make such moments a regular occurrence. Her passion and genuine interest in you reassured your doubts, and you felt a deep connection in that moment. As you contemplated your next moves, you decided to meet Tom and Peg as planned. At the restaurant, everything appeared normal, and the bond of friendship remained strong among the four of you. But the weight of the impending conversation hung in the air. As you broached the topic, Sherry sensed your anxiety and offered her support by placing her hand on yours. You asked what they would do if they found out their best friend had betrayed them, or if their spouse was having an affair with their best friend. The room fell silent, and tension grew. Tom, Peg, and Sherry struggled to find words as they grappled with the seriousness of your questions. Tom's silence spoke volumes, revealing the depth of his mistake. Peg understood the truth and reacted swiftly, delivering a powerful blow to Tom's face. The moment seemed to stretch out as you savored it, reminiscing about past memories and reflecting on the current situation. You couldn't help but notice that Tom's usual witty responses were absent, replaced by the stark reality of his actions. Tom's hesitation and Peg's reaction underscored the seriousness of the situation. You turned to Sherry and posed the question of how you should respond to her unfaithfulness, leaving the decision between a violent confrontation or a peaceful divorce hanging in the air. The room remained silent, emphasizing the weight of your words. Tom realized the gravity of his actions, and Peg understood it perfectly. Tom began to explain, but before he could finish his sentence, Peg intervened with a powerful blow to his face. Time seemed to stretch again, allowing you to savor the moment and contemplate the significance of this turning point. Memories flooded your mind, reminding you of the innocent conversations you had with Tom in the past. I imagined us playing ball and fighting the cool wind behind a sturdy oak tree. In an instant, a lot of conversations overwhelmed me. Disputes about the greatest runner, about the technique of unbuttoning a bra, the eternal question of who is better to be a Formula One racer or a movie star. There were curses in the air. "Oh, you bad speaker." The sound of Peg's hand stroke him again startled him. In the midst of this horror, I was still holding Sherry's hand. Her grip had frozen. Suddenly, Peg jumped out from behind the table, grabbed her purse, quickly turned on her heel, and hurriedly left. Surprisingly, I remained calm. "Could you pay the bill?" I asked Tom calmly. "You can take the leftovers," I said to Tom, getting up and turning to face my wife. "Come on," I said, and Sherry gracefully slipped out from behind the table, following me to the car. As we walked, the first words that escaped Sherry's lips were full of remorse. "I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry," I answered coldly. "Very nice. Are you sorry you got caught? Are you sorry that you hurt me?" My anger began to build. "Sorry you ruined our marriage? I'm sorry I seduced one of your best friends. I'm sorry that I ruined your old friendship. For what? What exactly are you sorry for?" I demanded, feeling the full weight of my disappointment. Sherry's tears began to flow, but not in streams, but in real drops running down her cheeks. I kept driving, trying to stay calm. When she plucked up the courage to speak, I raised my hand, signaling her to stop. She instinctively touched her forehead and closed her eyes, choking on sobs. I stopped the car. "You can come out," I said firmly. Sherry looked out the window and realized that we were in front of her parents' house. "No," she said almost with a groan. "Come out. Get out or I'll throw you out," I warned, tapping the steering wheel impatiently. Disappointment gripped me, and I suddenly flushed. "Get out!" I shouted, refusing to look at her as I drove away. When I arrived home, my initial plan was to pour myself a strong drink and mindlessly watch TV until sleep overcame me. But then something clicked in me. I opened Sherry's closet, overcome with a lot of emotions and uncertainty, and I was fixated on her clothes. I started tearing off hangers with a barbell, desperately grabbing buttons, trying to tear the seams. Anger grew within me, and I headed to the kitchen, returning with a chef's knife. Fueled by passion, I forcefully cut her clothes, slicing through the fabric with the knife. Drink had taken over me, pushing me to act on impulse. I impulsively lit a fire in the fireplace and tossed our wedding album into the flames. In a fit of rage, I collected a handful of her underwear one by one and tossed them into the fire, captivated by the sight of each piece catching fire. Afterward, I settled into an armchair and watched a classic football match absent-mindedly until exhaustion finally overtook me, and I fell asleep. Those hours were agonizing, filled with a sense of significance in every passing moment, yet none of them brought any comfort. I felt crushed, drawn toward the dark side of my emotions. I now understood the power of autosuggestion and the destructive tendencies of jealousy. I saw that beneath the surface of love, anger could run equally deep. The following morning brought a sense of calm. The house appeared tidy, except for the mess in the bedroom. The remnants of Sherry's torn clothes lay scattered on the floor around her closet. I left them there, along with the remains of the fireplace, the charred remains of our wedding album, the burnt bras, and the remnants of a nightgown. My mind felt empty, devoid of coherent thoughts. Driven by anger, I went to take a shower, letting the water cascade over me. In that moment, memories of our intimate moments from the previous night flashed through my mind. I realized that my life had undergone an irreversible change, yet strangely, I didn't feel strongly about it. In light of recent events, I decided to have a direct conversation with Tom about our situation. I called him on his mobile phone, and to my surprise, he answered and immediately apologized. He admitted that it all began as harmless flirting that spiraled out of control. He assured me that there was nothing more to it, but he did confess to running into her at the mall once, and from there, things escalated. It was an impulsive mistake he deeply regretted. Listening to him, I sensed that he wanted to say more, so I patiently waited. It became clear that neither of them had intended for Peg and me to find out about their affair, but they couldn't resist their attraction, and it continued despite their guilt. In that same moment, a decision solidified within me. I knew exactly what to do in this situation. Tom, our friendship is over because of this. I don't care what happens between you and Peg. You're out of my life completely. You no longer exist in my world. Goodbye, Tom. With those final words, I abruptly ended the call while Tom was still speaking. In that moment, when Tom genuinely expressed his regret for hurting me, I felt the sincerity in his words. He had succumbed to his own weaknesses and chosen the wrong path. The betrayal ran deep, and it was clear that our friendship could not be salvaged. I was left to fend for myself because Tom had chosen to betray me. Without informing Sherry's parents, I headed to their house. When I knocked on the door, her father greeted me with a sad and anxious expression. "How are you holding up?" I asked, concerned, as I stepped onto the porch. He partially closed the door behind him and let out a heavy sigh. "She told us," he admitted, his voice tinged with darkness. "You know she loves you, right? You should know that." He searched my eyes for some sign of understanding, shaking his head. "How foolish she is. It's unbelievable that I resort to such derogatory expressions when it comes to my own daughter. Foolish. I can't believe I'm saying these words about her, but it's foolish." The meaning was clear despite his scattered thoughts. He was fully aware of what he was saying. "Sherry made a mistake. A significant one, but still just a mistake. With effort and time, we can get past it. Foolish. So foolish. The name-calling might persist, but we have to overcome it." "Can I come in?" I asked Sherry's father. "My foolish daughter is in the kitchen." As I sat down at the kitchen table, I struggled to find the right words. Sherry looked pale, her eyes swollen from crying. Her mother stood silently beside her, and her father sipped water from a glass in small sips. Finally, I took a deep breath and outlined my decision. "Here's what I've decided," I began, and Sherry nodded, her face reflecting the pain I had felt the day before. "I'm going to file for divorce. There's no point in discussing the possibility of saving this marriage." The weight of her betrayal hung in the air. "You betrayed me, our marriage, and everything I believed in you. I've made a firm decision. I don't want to be married to you anymore. The pain you've caused me is immeasurable, and I doubt you'll ever fully grasp the extent of what you've done. I know you love me, and it's because of that love that I'm choosing to divorce you. I want you to feel the pain of losing me and live with that burden." In a moment of emotional turmoil, she made a guttural sound. It's really unsettling how similar the sounds we make in moments of pain are to the sounds of pleasure. But let me clarify my further intentions. Are you listening, Sherry? I asked, seeking some form of acknowledgement. Sherry didn't respond verbally but lowered her head in silent agreement. As soon as the divorce is finalized, and that won't happen quickly, we can consider the possibility of rekindling our relationship. But there's one condition. You must prove that you're a good person, and then we can start dating again. I looked into Sherry's eyes, recognizing the sadness and pain etched on her face. I want you to understand that I once loved you, and now I'm giving you the opportunity to make me fall in love with you again. But know that I'm not going back. This marriage is now history. If you truly love me, you'll do your best to win me back. Sherry nodded, her lips tightly pressed together as she contemplated the weight of my words. During the divorce, Tom was no longer considered my friend, and I hardly spoke to Sherry. We sold our apartment, and Sherry moved back in with her parents. While I searched for a new apartment, I ran into her father only a few times, and our conversations were casual and superficial. I didn't inquire about Sherry, but in these brief meetings, I made it clear that our agreement still stood. The divorce was officially finalized in just 4 months, a little less time than Sherry had spent in an affair with Tom. Peg reached out to me twice after the restaurant incident, but I told her about the divorce from Sherry and made it clear that I would only consider rebuilding our relationship if she distanced herself from both Tom and her own actions. To my surprise, Peg didn't attempt to contact me again. Instead, through mutual acquaintances, I learned that she and Tom sought counseling for their relationship, while I embarked on a vacation filled with adventure, engaging in activities like hiking and rock climbing in Chile. I thoroughly enjoyed it, as physical activity served as a therapeutic escape, clearing my mind completely. Upon my return, I found a message from Sherry on my work answering machine, inquiring about our conversation. As I rode in a taxi home from the airport, I decided to call her. I dialed her number and greeted her with a casual hello. The whole affair with infidelity and divorce had forced me to be more direct in my actions. I wondered whether she would call me. After informing her of my recent return to the city, I asked if we should continue the conversation. I proposed meeting and asked when she would be available. "What are you doing this afternoon? Would you like to grab a drink?" I suggested. When I arrived at the agreed-upon location, I saw her waiting in a booth, placing a glass of water in front of her. I took a seat and joined her. Our eyes met, and I nodded in greeting. I chose not to waste words, getting straight to the point. "Shall we discuss this further? Is there anything you want to say or suggest?" I asked, genuinely interested in her intentions. "I want to give this a chance," I added, emphasizing my desire to move forward. Curious about her own desires, I inquired, "What do you want?" Leaving no room for ambiguity, I sensed the tension building within her. She closed her eyes for a moment, seemingly pondering her next words. "Should I apologize? What should I do?" she finally asked, seeking guidance on the way forward. "I should also mention that I'm expecting a baby," she whispered, her words causing my eyes to immediately fall to her stomach. It became evident that her dress was deliberately loose, probably to conceal the pregnancy. The problem was, I didn't know whose child it was. After this revelation, Sherry began to cry. I was in such shock that I couldn't find any words. I silently took her hand and escorted her to a clinic for a DNA test. I was too bewildered by this unexpected news to think rationally. "Does Tom know about your pregnancy?" I asked as we drove to the clinic. In a trembling voice, she replied that Tom had ignored her message about the pregnancy. I was ready to explode with anger at that pathetic excuse for a man. We remained silent for the rest of the journey. After the DNA test, I took Sherry back to her parents' home, and I awaited the results with a sense of anticipation. Almost all night, I lay awake, unable to sleep, tossing and turning in bed. In the afternoon, I received a call from the clinic informing me that the DNA test results were ready. I quickly hopped into my car and drove to the clinic, and what I discovered was incredibly distressing. I was not the father of the unborn child. I sat in the car for about an hour, overcome with sorrow and tears. It's all settled now. Sherry and I can't be together anymore. I conveyed this news to her via a text message, also attaching a photo of the DNA test result. After sending this message, I received numerous calls from Sherry, but I didn't want to engage in conversation with her or see her again. I also made a serious decision to purchase a house far away from Sherry and Tom, in an effort to leave the past behind once and for all. It's been 7 months since I blocked Sherry and all our mutual acquaintances. I bought a small house and try my best not to dwell on the past with Sherry. My work and involvement in sports help me with this. I have a girlfriend with whom I spend weekends away from work, and we have a great time together, but I'm not looking for anything serious at the moment. Recently, I learned about Sherry's and her child's fate from my parents, and it brought me to tears, as I couldn't overcome the pain. Following my message, Sherry became hysterical, which eventually led to a deep depression. She even refused to eat and spent entire days in bed. Due to this emotional breakdown, she gave birth to a premature baby girl who was diagnosed with Down syndrome. Now Sherry is raising the child on her own, living with her parents, who assist her with everything.
How I uncovered my wife's cheating, her secret lover, and the unexpected path to my ultimate revenge. I encountered Lena, my wife of nearly 15 years, during high school. The subsequent Monday, after hosting a party at my parents' farm for my friends, I requested a family friend working for us to procure a couple of bottles of sour mashed potato. My cousin Terry, not accustomed to being drunk for long at his age, decided to head home instead of recovering. Although I successfully retrieved the keys from him, he believed he had outsmarted me. This idiot emerged from the front door, thinking he could walk the 5 miles to his house, and I allowed it. Reportedly, a young woman discovered him about a mile away, crawling through gutters while fetching the family mail, as he couldn't stand on his feet anymore. That's how I messed up. Before he left my parents' house, after involving her principled father, she transported my cousin to his parents' house. My aunt, my father's sister, had to deal with his multiple bouts of vomiting due to his foolishness. My parents learned about it, and I faced repercussions. In their view, I had betrayed their trust and was a horse's back. Regardless of my explanations, they believed the worst. Eventually, my aunt exaggerated the incident, portraying it as the worst thing humanity could do. I was in a tough spot. If only she knew the truth about her son's behavior. Nothing can be done when a person is blinded by faith and can't see reality. I accepted it and served my time. I realized early on that the truth doesn't matter most of the time. What matters is what people believe. From then on, I altered my attitude toward everyone I knew. My father used to say that I had aged prematurely because my walk changed. One day, an unfamiliar young woman approached me in the hallway before class after lunch. She expressed concern about wild parties at my parents' farm, alleging the presence of half-undressed girls and questioning my responsibility. I responded by asking her identity and the reason for her accusations. Lena LeBlanc introduced herself and mentioned finding a man from my parties in a ditch near her parents' house. I considered how far from the truth her perception was, but refrained from correcting her, mindful of the potential impact on my reputation in our small town of Jackson. I assured her that the situation wasn't as bad as she thought, avoiding any correction to her misconceptions. Instead, I invited her to join the next Saturday night party. Lena blushed, insisting she wasn't that kind of girl. I playfully remarked that maybe she wasn't, but she seemed interested. I continued to observe her body language, suggesting that her actions contradicted her words. She called me a horse's back, and I replied that it was true, but horses' asses were meant to be ridden hard. I quipped that she should let me know when she's up for it. She slapped me and stormed off, but I caught a glimpse of a smile before she slapped me. I chuckled, realizing my reputation for the year was already established. My cousin Terry, who witnessed the entire incident, mentioned that her words had made me one of the most popular in the educational institution that year. I responded that she had no idea about anything. Terry asked what I said to her, and I brushed it off, not bothering to explain. After smoking a joint each, I laughed because Terry was unaware that I had put the deck on the line. With that said, we headed to our first class, initiating a game between Lena and me. I played with Lena every opportunity I got, extracting everything I could from her. Whenever I saw her in public, I made it clear to anyone watching that I was undressing her with my eyes. This behavior became so noticeable that one of her friends would play the song Hungry Eyes on her cell phone when she spotted me, a way for me to get revenge for Lena LeBlanc punching me in the face. Yeah, I was being an idiot, but I enjoyed it. Additionally, she had an irresistible body, and I was just a fool honest enough to admit it. If one of her friends asked me what I was doing, I would honestly say, I'm interested in her. However, Lena declared we'd have a relationship when hell freezes over, and until then I should respect her wishes. This only fueled Lena's frustration, as her friends wanted to know what I had done to provoke such a reaction. When she explained it to them, they either laughed at the situation or teased her about her response. Lena LeBlanc was attractive in my eyes, a red-haired Cajun from the deep south with a body that haunted my dreams. Standing at about 5 feet 6 inches, she was tight, sweet, with curves in all the right places. If she got upset outside of the educational institution, she could unleash a stream of swear words in Cajun French at a mile a minute. Okay, I'll admit it. I enjoyed seeing her get upset. When her friends informed her about my actions, the smile on my face, seeing her blush over comments about our situation, revealed that I was enjoying it. I added to that when she wore a low-cut blouse displaying her cleavage, releasing a long, hungry wolf cry that echoed through the hallways. Everyone noticed Lena had put on something that made her look really good, and for the rest of the day, every guy clamored to check her out. I don't know if she enjoyed the attention, but I found it amusing. Numerous times I caught myself gazing at her enticing little horseshoe-shaped rear with a beautiful 36 rack, a narrow waist, and 34 hips. There wasn't a single coital act I didn't imagine doing with her. At times, I fantasized about taking her into the hayloft in my parents' barn, although I never hoped it would lead anywhere because her family was affluent. And mine was not. She possessed the spirit of a wild horse yet to be tamed, if that was possible. Depending on her mood, she could be passive, aggressive, or dominant. A man. Attempting to win her over would need the patience of Job, as it would take a long time to understand her before devising a plan to get into her clothes. The more I studied her, the more I realized how complex her personality was. That's how much her hot body and personality turned me on. If any woman could give me a blue balls attack, it was her. There were moments when she would catch my eye when no one else noticed, doing something to tease me. We both played this game intentionally to frustrate each other. It took almost the entire educational institution year before we both realized how effective it was. Everyone knew I was an ass lover, and nothing in my eyes was better than what Lena wore on her frame. Once, catching me ogling 3 of her friends, she leaned over and wiggled their asses while laughing. Apparently, her mother had told her that men attracted to asses turned out to be the most faithful husbands, a belief that spread through the entire educational institution after she shared it with Flat Karen. We were both set to graduate 12th grade with honors. She became valedictorian and I secured the 2nd spot. She believed that if my extracurricular activities were known, I wouldn't be considered at all. Rehearsing for our graduation ceremony roles on the auditorium stage a month away, I was to be there in case she fell ill. I knew she'd come regardless, even out of spite. There was no way she'd let me win by default. Both recipients of substantial educational grants, our last high educational institution dance was that upcoming Saturday. In the fall, I planned to attend Southeast Missouri University to pursue a master's degree in agricultural science. Leaving the stage through back stairs leading down the hallway, I ran my hand over her soft rear end, whispering, "When will you be ready to let me knock on it?" Turning around, she slapped me, saying, "When hell freezes over." Fool. When there was nothing to lose and no witnesses, I became a bit aggressive. Frustrated, I pulled her close, and lowering my head, looked into her eyes. Initially resistant, I persevered with unwavering determination, recognizing it as my sole opportunity to make a move. Her eyes widened as I brought my mouth close, initiating a forceful, deep French kiss with intensity, claiming her mouth as my own. Injecting the kiss with passion and desire, I decided that if I was paying the price, I deserved to extract every ounce of satisfaction. It was to be my first and perhaps only kiss with her, and I aimed to make it unforgettable. After savoring the taste I longed for, I released her to gauge her reaction, expecting a passionate or frustrated response. I was surprised when she forcefully pinned me against the wall, matching my aggression and turning the situation thrilling. Another deep, lingering kiss followed, revealing her assertive side. Our bodies melded together as she grabbed my lap, showcasing her assertiveness, and the recognition of size added intensity to the charged atmosphere. Lena expressed that she had been waiting for this for most of the educational institution year, mentioning that she was glad I finally decided to be a man. She wished I had told her that months ago and requested that I loosen my grip. I responded, stating that I wouldn't until she agreed to exclusivity. She firmly replied, "Deal. You've been the only one I've looked at since you slapped me." I smiled and brought my mouth to hers again, this time revealing my tender side, kissing her softly and deliberately. My hands firmly rested on the softness of her cheeks, feeling like I had held a piece of heaven. Our kisses were both demanding and open, with Lena exploring my figure. Leaving the landing a few minutes later, thinking we heard a noise, we held hands, realizing our relationship had taken a big step forward. Outside the educational institution, the heightened mutual attraction during the educational institution year intensified our feelings. Those who saw us leave immediately noticed the smiles on our faces, sparking discussions in the corridors for the rest of the day. It was amusing because neither of us had dated that year, seemingly waiting for each other. I waited for her at the educational institution entrance, and without saying a word, she handed me the educational institution book she was talking to at home. Lena suggested stopping at the Dairy Queen for a milkshake before I dropped her off at home. Karen was shocked, exclaiming if Lena and I were finally admitting our interest in each other. Lena assured her that she would call later that night to explain everything. We walked out of the house holding hands, heading for my Jeep Cherokee Sport. At the Dairy Queen, she wanted a Blizzard, and I wanted a regular shake, so I ordered both in the largest size. In the city park at one of the picnic tables, we started getting to know each other. Around 6 in the evening, I dropped her off at her parents' house. Her mother opened the door for her, and her father, shocked by my respectful approach, eventually gave his consent for me to take his daughter to the dance on Saturday night. He appreciated the respect, considering it a testament to my upbringing. Years later, when I asked for his daughter's hand in marriage, he didn't object as long as I followed his plans to protect his assets. After Lena went into her parents' house, I headed to my parents' farm. My parents sensed a change in my life, and when questioned, I mentioned an interesting conversation. Privately, my dad asked about the redhead I invited to the educational institution dance on Saturday night. From that day on, Lena and I were inseparable. It was Saturday, the day my parents went into town. I was in the hayloft, preparing to haul a few bales of straw after cleaning out 4 stalls with the loader on the front of the tractor. I did this once a month, usually on the first Saturday of the month. The horses were in the paddock in the pasture. I carried everything to the edge of the loft and was just getting ready to spread them out on the floor of the stalls when I heard Lena's voice calling me. "I'm here," I said. "I have 14 more bales to drop before I go down." I started throwing them over the side as fast as I could and was about ready to climb down when I saw Lena's head sticking out above the floor. I went over to greet her as she finished her climb. It was funny how much flat space was open in the straw bales. A moment later, we were lying with our arms around each other on bales of straw, our mouths closed, and our hands exploring each other's bodies. She, like me, was eager to get up from where we stood on the stairs. It wasn't long before she was pulling off my shirt, and I had just finished undoing the buttons of her blouse, anticipating how I would feel her beautiful chest when we were interrupted. Lena and I probably would have gotten carried away if we hadn't heard my parents honking. I noticed my parents trying to grab my attention as we descended the stairs. They were already approaching the barn. Lena and I swiftly spread out the straw in the stalls. In one of the stalls, Mom and Dad caught us throwing straw at each other, and laughter ensued. Curiosity led my parents to the barn, prompted by the sight of a strange car in the yard when I wasn't around. They were pleasantly surprised to find a pretty girl about my age visiting the farm. It was intriguing to observe the surprise on my parents' faces when I introduced Lena to them as my girlfriend. I informed them that as soon as I finished bedding the floor, I would saddle the horses and take her for a ride. Mom suggested having lunch first, and Lena volunteered to help. They headed toward the house, prompting my father to commend my quick thinking and advise me not to jeopardize this new relationship. "Lena is better company, just like your mother was at the same age," he said. "Make sure she's good enough to be the mother of your children if you're considering it." My father, a practical man, offered straightforward thoughts, emphasizing the consequences of our actions. I learned then that he always had a fondness for redheads. Dad assisted me in setting up the 4 horse stalls before returning to the house. By the time we got back, Mom and Lena had already become friends. After lunch, we went for a horseback ride, reaching the back 50. After tying the horses to a low branch, finding new spots on the grass by the swimming pond, we leaned against a tree. Around 5 in the afternoon, Lena left to get ready for the educational institution dance. While dancing that night, Terry overheard Lena telling Karen that my sweet and gentle personality attracted her. Despite our teasing, we never took it further. Lena explained to Karen and Terry that she appreciates my ability to control my temper, yet can be aggressive when needed. His passive nature guides him in everything, but when he sets his mind to something, no one can make him back down. Waiting for me like I was the only one proved that, she added. Terry attested to my loyalty, saying, "He'd do anything for me, just as I would for him. Piss him off, and you'll realize you underestimated him. More than one boy here crossed him, and after he dealt with them, They were lying on the ground in blood. When I picked her up for the last dance of the educational institution year, her parents were surprised when I brought her a corsage without a special occasion. They said it was the most beautiful bouquet they had ever seen. I explained that I made it from plants in a small nursery my father and I had started on the farm. I made it in neutral colors, so it goes with anything, I said. They seemed very impressed. She looked stunning in that white summer dress, emphasizing her curves. All night I thought about her. There was no doubt in everyone's mind that we were now a couple. Yeah, she was a real tease to me and she knew it. I think she was irritating me that night, kind of paying me back for what we'd done to each other during the educational institution year. Toward the end of the summer, we spent a lot of time in the hayloft. Mom and I had a long conversation after she found my stash of contraceptives hidden in a far drawer. It was then that she decided to have a conversation with the woman she hoped would be her future daughter-in-law. I must have realized what was said because, shortly afterward, Lena informed me that she was taking birth control pills. One night at dinner, Mom put in her 2 cents, saying, "The horses seem to like the stalls better and they've gotten much sharper in the pasture. I wonder if it might be because the straw has taken on a new odor." I almost choked on my food and started coughing, and my dad looked up and said, "I missed something?" My father recognized my early interest in gardening and fostered its growth under his guidance. We transformed 20 acres of our 250-acre farm into a Christmas tree farm, acquiring small trees inexpensively through a reforestation grant after identifying the best tree type for the Christmas market. Every spring break, my father and I spent a week planting rows of new seedlings, creating a special bonding time for us. About 2 weeks before planting, we tilled the plot, repeating this process 3 or 4 times, depending on the weather, before leveling it. This facilitated quick and easy planting, allowing us to promote our first crop well before sale. The following season, with approximately 400 trees standing at 80 feet tall, the remaining task was pruning them to perfection for retail buyers. We even devised a labeling system for buyers to know the farm of origin. In 6th grade, my father, acknowledging my passion for growing plants, emphasized the need to replenish topsoil. An arrangement with the city of Jackson involved bringing collected yard waste to a designated site for mass topsoil production. Cape Girardeau adopted a similar practice, and from an early age, at least twice a month. I spent a day or two creating mulch by chopping up twigs, filtering out non-biodegradable items burned in oil drums. The ashes were scattered along the plot boundary for a cleaner end product. Once the pile reached a certain size, we added chemicals to stimulate the rotting process and maintain moisture. Turning the heap over once or twice a month ensured proper aeration. Local building contractors learned they could dump excess soil without a removal fee, mostly Missouri red clay. We mixed this soil with our biodegradable mulch, leading this side of our growing business to claim quite a few acres after topsoil removal. Some of the donated soil was used to level and grade the land for our greenhouses. It took 18 months to transform useless dirt into high-quality topsoil used for bedding in our greenhouses and sold to the retail market in 10-pound bags. In the first 3 years, enough profit was made to build 2 large glass greenhouses, heated in winter with gas furnaces, filled with growing flowers, and shipped to local wholesalers as needed. Implementing a system of PVC tubing and an expanding hose, we designed an automatic watering system hanging from the top down. Applying the same principles to water our crops, a drainage system built by my father on the concrete floor collected excess water for reuse. This efficient approach saved on costs and eliminated the need for a pond to collect excess fertilizer from watering. During the summer, we constructed an additional 4 greenhouses to cultivate white and red poinsettias for Christmas, eventually reaching a total of 10. Recognizing the money earned through our collaborative efforts, my father decided I could graduate without incurring debt. I vividly recall Lena's initial exposure to our operation, which aided her comprehension of why I selected this career path. My father conveyed that my inquisitive nature played a pivotal role in bringing this business to fruition. He noted that I was always asking questions, prompting family discussions. Following conversations with my wife and securing her approval, the family embarked on this venture, now a significant and steadily growing source of income. Inquiring about the farm's previous use, Lena asked. My father explained it formerly raised beef, influenced by market fluctuations. By my graduation, we boasted 22 greenhouses, each 240 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 9 feet high. Weekly, we delivered high-quality organic produce. Responding to increased demand, we expanded further, with 2 greenhouses dedicated to leaf lettuce, 2 to bok choy, and 2 to English cucumbers. Employing 20 individuals, Our chemical-free organic produce commanded higher prices from wholesalers, ensuring our financial prosperity. As anticipated, I joined the family business full-time while Lena pursued a career as a family nurse practitioner associated with Southeast Missouri Hospital. I proposed to her within a week of her receiving her license, and 3 months later, we hastily married due to her pregnancy with our daughter. Our 2 sons arrived a year apart from our wedding day. Spoiled by my parents, Lena was cherished, with my mother becoming our children's nanny, giving her a renewed sense of purpose. To this day, our children reflect the morals and values she instilled in them. Celebrating our 14th anniversary, my cousin Terry and his wife Karen expressed concerns about our relationship, suggesting Lena appeared to dominate and control me. At a family barbecue, they confronted me, asserting that Lena treated me as a second-class citizen, displaying a motherly fatigue in the relationship. Despite my attempts to defend Lena, they insisted that I had stopped listening to her, causing resentment. According to Terry, Lena was leveraging my softer personality to assert dominance, and some friends suspected she harbored a romantic interest outside our marriage. Reflecting on these comments, I confronted Lena about her treatment, expressing fatigue from being treated like a doormat. This revelation shocked her, making her feel out of place for the first time in a while. Luna, my 13-year-old daughter, questioned my father, asking him what had gotten into him. I responded loudly for everyone to hear, stating that I had reached a point where I could no longer tolerate the feeling that her mother was treating me like a servant. I warned that if her mother didn't change her attitude, our house would be turbulent for months. This statement served as an awakening for everyone present. I realized that for most of our married life, I had turned a blind eye because it wasn't worth fighting over. I allowed my wife to walk over me like a doormat without resistance. That night, Lena and I had a significant argument, something that had been brewing for a long time. I ended up sleeping on the couch. Toward the end of our argument, Lena remarked that I just didn't know how extra I was. That's when I lost control. We were fighting outside, away from the kids' hearing. Driven by anger, I grabbed Lena, turned her over my knee, and spanked her, a method I had used with our children for misbehavior. She went into the bedroom in tears with a very red bottom, locking the door to prevent my entry. To say that Lena was tiptoeing around me the next morning is an understatement. Lena had just been confronted with a new reality. When my wife and kids left home the next morning, I returned from the large office near the greenhouses to investigate. As I lay on the couch, contemplating when the change in our marriage began, it struck me that it was 8 years ago, a couple of months after my mother's passing. After conducting a thorough search of her bedroom, I found a wrist bracelet with custom-made 18-karat gold charms. The issue was I hadn't bought them for her. The charms were so sensual that she could never wear them in public. I knew they must have been custom-made to order by her lover due to their significant expense. I quietly pocketed it to take with me, wanting it to be acknowledged. This discovery lent credence to Karen and Terry's suspicions. Returning to my office, I kept quiet when questioned about it. I mentioned that I had a lot on my mind, which was true. Around 3 in the afternoon, with an office staff member present, I asked her to call the group my wife was in to inquire if they were accepting new clients. Fiona inquired for personal reasons, asking why I wanted to know. I explained that I needed to check my wife's actual work schedule, as some rumors had come to my attention that I needed to prove were not true. Fiona commented as she walked out the door that finally someone had the courage to tell me what they had been hearing for months. Fiona, Karen's sister and a military widow, had joined our company while her husband was in the service. She was now raising her daughter alone. I often wondered why she couldn't find another man. Fiona was the complete opposite of her sister, and beautiful. In all the years of our marriage, my wife was the only woman who had caught my attention. However, after seeing what Fiona had to offer in terms of femininity, I realized I was still young enough to start over. The freedom of knowing I had another choice brought peace to my state of mind. Although I had known her for years, thanks to Terry and Karen, I hadn't paid much attention to her. For some reason, I experienced the excitement of the unknown again, an amazing feeling. When she returned, the information she provided was quite revealing. Her work schedule was not at all what I had envisioned. Instead of working Thursdays and Fridays until 10 p.m. every week, she only did it once a month, like all the other doctors in their office. Fiona and I chatted for quite a few minutes. She attempted to pose questions subtly, avoiding clarity in her inquiries. Whether she was aware of it or not, she instilled a few thoughts in my mind that fostered hope for my future. This afforded her a significant amount of unaccounted-for time. It was surprising to discover that she only worked half a day on Wednesdays. Now the question arose, what was she doing with all that free time? 8 years ago, when a tragic accident befell my mother. My father and I were startled to learn that she had bequeathed her shares in the family business to me, entrusting them to her 3 grandchildren. During my childhood, they had sold most of the farm at an inflated price to a corporation, retaining 10 acres around the house in their name and another 10 in mine. The corporation paid off the mortgage for 10 years with interest. They gifted me the land as a wedding present for Lena and me, and on that land, Lena and I constructed our house. My father took his wife's loss hard and withdrew from society for a few months afterward. During that period, I assumed the role of the company's president, and my father retired as our first CEO, though he still came in 3 mornings a week to stay updated and serve as an advisor. I was aware of an impending significant business trip in a couple of weeks, during which I would have to visit 8 different company offices to renew multi-year contracts requiring my signature. These contracts included product line extensions, providing opportunities to increase revenue. As it involved 3 countries, I had to be away for at least 3 weeks. My father and I continued to lead our company, now employing over 100 people with more than 48 greenhouses operating at maximum capacity. Fortunately, in my first year of full-time employment, I conducted a survey to identify potential underground water veins and found one that would sustain us for years. By discontinuing the county water supply, we reduced our total expenses by $10,000 per month. Additionally, we uncovered a vast natural gas cavity. Since the land had been in the family for generations, we still owned the mineral rights. Through negotiations with major companies, we secured a mutually beneficial arrangement. Even after covering our heating costs, we received a substantial monthly royalty. My cousin Terry, serving as our CFO, visited my office to brief me on the latest cash flow statement, revealing that we were on track for the most significant year of growth in the company's history. During this private meeting, I disclosed my discovery to him. Examining the report, he was as astounded as I was. Terry inquired about my plans, asking what I intended to do. I replied that I wouldn't send someone else to sign the contracts. Instead, I planned to pretend I had no idea what was going on. I explained that this would give the private investigators I was going to hire plenty of time to find out who my wife's lover was. Terry questioned the relevance of finding out in a 50-50 state like ours, suggesting it wouldn't matter in divorce court. I remarked that Lena's father, Leonard LeBlanc, was and still is a conniving person. Before Lena and I were married, he made us sign a prenuptial agreement, and I guess Lena forgot about it. Terry asked why he did it, wondering if Leonard LeBlanc was worth millions thanks to fracking, to protect his daughter from me ever getting a piece of her inheritance. I responded, stating that if we divorced because of infidelity, the guilty party walks away with the clothes, and that's the end of it. Upon arriving home that evening, my demeanor had notably shifted. My wife appeared to show a respect for me that had been absent for years. It seemed evident to both of us that our relationship had undergone a significant change. Lena was undoubtedly attempting to discern what I might be aware of. An interesting note was that same morning my father had opted for a 2-week fishing trip with childhood friends, a plan they had encouraged for years. He'd be away until my return. Throughout his absence, Lena had been home more frequently, sparking suspicions that something undisclosed was occurring in her life. A few days later, my daughter informed me that her mother was frantically searching for something and questioning all 3 children about it. "Daddy, Mom accused us of going into your bedroom and going through her dresser drawers," Luna said, noting the emotional weight attached to what her mother sought. Upon my return home, I inquired about it, but Lena downplayed its significance. When I mentioned our daughter's concern, Lena suggested that Luna might have misunderstood, planning to clarify after dinner that night. During dinner, I regarded Lena similarly to how I had during our school days, prompting a significant change in her mood. I presumed Lena now believed I was aware of her affair. Post-dinner, as she put the boys to bed, my daughter questioned me about the situation. "Luna, I'm not sure," I said. "People have informed me of something, and if it's true, things are going to get a lot worse around here for a while because it's going to take your parents a while to sort it out. Just remember that this situation didn't arise because of your behavior, or your brother's behavior. It's been 3 weeks since I discovered the bracelet with all the charms on it. The 16 charms were valued at $8,000 each. The platinum used in the bracelet, along with the gold, put the chain at $20,000. Whoever gave her this piece of jewelry, it was made by one of the most famous jewelers in the jewelry business. Since all the charms were unique, they were bought to commemorate special moments or events in these two's relationship. If you figure that she received 2 charms a year, perhaps for her birthday and anniversary, that works out to about 8 years. Reluctant to accept it, the circumstantial evidence pointed toward a direction I refused to consider. That's why I adjusted my schedule to acquire what I needed. I booked a hotel room in St. Louis to receive a full report from private investigators before proceeding with my business there. My fears were confirmed. My wife's lover for almost 8 years was a man I had known all my life. The private investigators handed me a written copy and a flash drive with the recorded evidence. After the gentleman departed with full payment, I perused the comprehensive report, finding it so detailed that I wondered how I didn't become physically ill. Fortunately, on my way back from Canada, I purchased a couple of bottles of scotch at the duty-free store and consumed more than a couple of strong shots while reviewing the report. Summoning my courage, I contacted my former father-in-law, Leonard LeBlanc, and requested his personal email account. Leonard, a proud man with his values, faced the personal distress caused by this report. Yet I knew that if I didn't disclose the truth, he would assist Lena in undermining me during our divorce. I explained to Leonard that I wanted him to know what's in store for him because he wouldn't believe it if he heard it from me. I mentioned that the dossier was handed to me about 2 hours ago and cost me $6,000 to get. When I received the letter, I sent it to him via my laptop and awaited the imminent phone call. Leonard LeBlanc might have appeared to be the epitome of Homer Pyle upon initial acquaintance. Standing over 6 feet 5 inches tall, he exhibited the same clumsiness and awkwardness as everyone else in his childhood. He was the son of a fortunate alligator hunter who amassed wealth. Despite his unassuming demeanor and simple language, he conveyed the impression of a dull-witted person. Many were deceived, underestimating the genius he concealed from most. When intrigued, he delved into thorough research starting from the ground level. CEOs were often astonished to discover after sealing a challenging deal that he had only been with their company for 6 months. While leading the corporation, he possessed the knowledge to enhance their profitability and productivity by exploiting their vulnerabilities, potentially saving millions from their initial costs. As soon as my cell phone rang, I answered, anticipating it to be my father-in-law. Leonard exclaimed, expressing his surprise at the situation, admitting that if I had told him, he would have called. He characterized me as the biggest liar in the country and questioned how much worse things were going to get from there. I asserted that I planned to do the same thing to them as he did, stating there would be no mercy for either of them. Leonard replied, expressing understanding and absolving me of blame, stating that he'd burn anyone for what they've done. He requested that I promise not to do anything before we talk and assured me that our words wouldn't be recorded. Leonard LeBlanc, a religious man with his own views on life and morality, garnered respect for steadfastly maintaining his principles. I suggested to my dad that we go fishing with the boys the first Sunday after I get home, and that he could call my daughter to arrange it tonight if she'll be home. He liked the idea, seeing it as an opportunity to eliminate 2 birds with 1 stone. He wanted to know what made me suspicious. I explained that I found a bracelet with a bunch of charms on it, had it appraised, and discovered it was custom-made. Last Monday, while in Montreal, I arranged to have it shipped to my wife from Paris. It would be sent by courier, 1 piece at a time, to arrive at her workplace with a note. I planned to contact my father-in-law and his lover at the appropriate time so they could find out the cost of my silence. All 16 pieces must be in her possession before I return home. Leonard expressed concern, anticipating that my wife and her lover would turn into lunatics. I replied, explaining that it would give me time to find a buyer for my shares in the corporation. Selling my father's dream was the only thing that could hurt him as much as it hurt me, throwing them off balance psychologically for the near future. Leonard understood the plan, and I continued, stating that their fears would become more apparent as the date of my return approached. Leonard inquired about the remaining duration of my trip, and I replied that I had 2 more weeks to live out of a suitcase. From the day the first courier letter hit my wife's eyes, they would be the walking dead. I remarked that it would have been easier if they were actually dead, suggesting a less complicated resolution. After he hung up the phone, I relaxed, knowing Leonard LeBlanc wouldn't wait for anyone. Hailing from the swamps, he knew how to resolve a matter without unnecessary questions. In the heart of New York City, staying at the Trump Hotel, I received the detective's unwelcome news. While still at my desk, well after 9 p.m., my father was dead, and I was shocked. I had to inquire about the details of what had happened. Evidently, my wife and he chose to take a swim in the rear southeast of the pond where Lena and I had spent considerable time on the initial Wednesday afternoon we started dating. When the kids were at school, they opted for a horseback ride to cool off. Dad got there before Lena due to the hot weather. Local authorities suspected that someone had introduced a pet alligator a couple of years ago, which had adapted to its new habitat. Divers found my father's body after they eliminated the alligator. All 3 of us grasped the circumstances. Lena, my wife, was physically undamaged but grappling with significant emotional distress. Our children stayed with their grandparents until my wife regained control of the situation. Returning to my table, I shared the recent revelation with those still present, then excused myself to attend to personal matters. While walking back to my room, I pondered the consequences of being on Leonard LeBlanc's bad side. I wondered about his plans for his daughter. After a stiff drink, I placed a call and Leonard promptly answered. I began by asking about the kids. Dad said in slang that it was fair enough for the midlines, indicating that the kids were upset but within what he considered normal for their age. I asked if I could speak with them if they were up, and he handed me the cell phone. I spent the next hour talking to all 3 kids before returning the phone to Grandpa. According to what Lena managed to explain, Leonard mentioned that my father drowned as an alligator dragged him away. They found his undressed body with several dead animals in the refrigerator. While his body wasn't bitten, it had a few scratches, so he recommended a closed casket. I thanked Dad solemnly and informed him that I would be home Saturday morning to handle the funeral arrangements. I mentioned that I needed to call my wife and check on her. He remarked that it sounded good, stating that at times like this one has to keep up appearances before saying goodbye. I called Lena, and reports indicated she was in serious condition. Conversing with her was challenging, as she couldn't stop crying. She couldn't fathom how they hadn't spotted an alligator before, given their weekly horseback rides. I questioned if it was typical for them to swim undressed, and Lena couldn't bear it, dropping the call. Now she knew I was aware of the truth. The following morning, during a business meeting, the same 2 detectives from the previous night called me in after my wife fainted. While grieving and trying to drown her sorrows, a gas explosion occurred, blowing out part of the house. She didn't escape in time and was fatally crushed by debris. I requested to expedite the process due to my need to fly out urgently. Fortunately, they understood, and I secured a better deal than anticipated. I managed to catch the last plane to the Cape that evening. Stepping off the 12-seater plane, I found my father-in-law waiting. Dad said that my wife and he were counting on me and the grandchildren to stay with them until things were settled. This would give me time to get things organized and settled. I inquired about how Mom was handling it, and Dad revealed that she struggled until the police informed them this afternoon that she was your father's longtime mistress. Their suspicions were confirmed when they discovered blackmail notes Lena had been receiving in your father's office. I remarked that it must have bothered them. Dad added that it was a bracelet with 16 different erotic charms, all undressed, suggesting it could be seen as a model of what lovers did in those days. Of course, they planned to talk to me after the funeral. I asked how I should arrange to meet them, and Dad suggested a simple plan. I should take the prenup and the private investigator's report with me and give them to them right away. It would prove that I had no motive to frame them. I smiled, knowing he said it to remind me that all passings, until proven one way or another, would be treated as suspicious. The more candid I was about them, the less chance they would consider it a homicide. Dad and I went to the funeral home office together to select a casket. We settled on a closed casket for both of them. I then contacted Terry at the office, informing him that the contracts were signed and I would be taking a few days off. There was a considerable turnout at the funeral and tea party for the lovebirds. Considering everything, I believe my kids handled it well. I maintained my composure as much as possible, though there were moments when I couldn't hide my emotions. Many speculated about a closer-than-usual relationship between the two, but nothing was publicly mentioned about it. The detectives patiently waited while the fire inspectors finalized a report on the gas explosion at my house. They determined the cause to be a faulty installation conducted while I was away. Upon receiving the report, I could legally sue the gas company for negligent death and loss of home. They found no evidence to determine when the alligator was placed in the pond. Presenting the prenuptial agreement and the private investigator's report, I gave them a copy using my father-in-law's printer. They appreciated my disclosure, resolving any potential issues that might arise upon others reviewing their final report. While sitting on the back patio with Lena's father and enjoying cold beer, he mentioned that he and his wife planned to change their will, leaving everything to the kids in a living trust controlled by me until they reached the age of 30. I responded that it doesn't matter if he had anything to do with what happened, stating that karma has given them what they deserve, and we should leave it at that. Leonard smiled and complimented me, saying that he always knew I was a smart man who knew what to say when it was needed. At Macy's, where the kids and I were making significant purchases, Fiona ran into me. We had moved into my dad's house during the remodel of mine, which was stale and desperately needed repair. I explained to Fiona that we were buying things because we had nothing left, and introduced her to my 3 children, Luna, Leon, and Levi. We decided to start with the boys, figuring out their preferences and dislikes, gathering enough underwear, t-shirts, blue jeans, shirts, jackets, and other clothes to last 2 weeks. After paying for our selections, I made 6 trips to the car, utterly exhausted by the end, including the last trip involving new shoes. The children suggested that Fiona should come with us to our temporary home, and then she could return with me to help pick out a new closet. Fiona hesitated, expressing that she didn't want me to think she's meddling in things that don't concern her. Luna firmly stated that she thought I should go with Fiona and then take her out to dinner to show how much we appreciate her help. That's precisely what we did. After dropping the kids off and unloading everything, Fiona and I returned, working for a total of 4 hours. I invited her for dinner, and she mentioned that she had called Luna to get her agreement and made arrangements on her cell phone to have their favorite pizza delivered. When I got home, the big question surfaced. Daddy, are you going to ask her out on a real date? And that remains a question yet to be answered.